Mr. Chairman, my clock says 7:30. Does that jive with yours?
It does.
All right, whenever you want, we can start the meeting.
All right, let's call the meeting to order. Do I need to read this, where the place is where you can find the meeting?
Yeah, but first let's have a roll call vote to start the regular meeting. So we can ask Jennifer to give another roll call vote, please.
Mr. DeFilia?
Here.
Mr. Duffy?
Here.
Mr. Fisher?
Here.
Mr. Good? Ms. Close?
Here.
Mr. Ciano?
Here.
Mr. Weinstein?
Here.
Chairman D. Benedetto?
Here.
We have a quorum, Mr. Chairman. We can start.
Remotely, the place where you can find the meeting is remotely via GoToMeeting. Please join the meeting from your computer, tablet, or smartphone. https://www.gotomeet.me/Ocean Township/COMMDEV. You can also dial in using your phone, United States, 1-786-535-3211. Access code 114-689-133. If you're new to GoToMeeting, get the app and be ready to, when your first meeting starts, at https://global.gotomeeting.com/install/114-689-133. Salute to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. The notice of requirements of the Open Public Meeting Law for this meeting has been satisfied. A copy of the notice has been sent to Asbury Park Press and the Coaster and filed at the office of Ocean Township Clerk on July 27th, 2020. Board policy: no new cases will be started after 10:30 p.m. and no new testimony taken after 11 p.m. Resolution memorialization: Matthew and Christine Clark, Block 140, Lot 98 and 99, 400 Lincoln Avenue, Ocean, extension of approval. Can I have a motion to approve?
John Duffy moved.
Second?
I'll second.
Who seconds that?
Weinstein, second.
Weinstein?
Roll call, please.
Mr. DeFilia?
Yes.
Mr. Duffy?
Yeah, sorry.
Mr. Fisher?
Yes.
Ms. Close?
Here. Yes.
Mr. Ciano?
Yes.
Mr. Weinstein?
Yes.
Chairman D. Benedetto?
Yes. Cases carried to December 14th meeting 2020. Amano, Block 33.14, Lot 2, 710 West Park Avenue, Oakhurst, T1. And Giovanni Scarpino, Block 9, Lot 6.11 and 7.11, 65 Larchwood Avenue, Elbron, R-1. Our first application is the minor site plan that that my subcommittee unanimously approved. It's 35 Land LLC, Block 141, Lot 112, 922 Highway 35, Ocean, C5. This is an application to convert an existing building from a Burger King restaurant to a dental office. I would like to offer a motion for approval. I need a second.
I'll second.
Who seconded?
Mr. Fisher. Dave, excuse me, Dr. Fisher.
Roll call.
Mr. DeFilia?
Yes.
Mr. Duffy?
Yeah.
Sorry?
That was yes.
Thank you. Mr. Fisher?
Yes.
Ms. Close?
Yes.
Mr. Sayano?
Yes.
Mr. Wine?
Yes.
Chairman Di Benedetto?
Yes.
Thank you.
Our next case is the Andrew Garrity Block 9.04, Lots 7, 8, and 9, 238 Dixon Avenue, Elbron Park. Court reversed the planning board's denial of August 27, 2018. Board permitted to impose conditions on any approvals. Mr. Higgins, could you read in your conditions for the approval?
Surely I
Mr.
will.
Chairman, before Mr. Higgins reads his report, I'd like to give a little background for this because this is a matter that hasn't been before the board in some time. And for the members of the public, some background information I'd suggest would also be proper. So this matter came before the board, as Mr. Higgins may discuss a little bit more, for a subdivision. After two sessions before the board voted narrowly to deny the application. There was an appeal by the applicant. It went before the Superior Court in Freehold in the normal course. And on May 18, 2020, the court entered an order reversing the planning board's denial of the request for the two-lot subdivision. And it was remanded to the board. What that means is that the court felt that the board did not have sufficient reasons to deny it, but she remanded it not for a new hearing, but for the limited purpose of having the board consider what conditions the board would like to impose on the court approval of the subdivision. There was a motion filed by the applicant to the court suggesting that notice did not have to be sent out in advance of this particular session tonight, but the court indicated that notice was required, just as notice would have been required at the beginning of any initial hearing. And therefore, the applicant's counsel has provided a standard proof of service that all property within 200 feet of the property in question were sent by certified letter a notice of this evening's matter. And there was also the standard notice of publication in the newspaper. Now, what's unique about this is that while we're going to hear from Mr. Higgins and the board can deliberate this, there is no opportunity from either the applicant through counsel or from any member of the public to ask questions, attempt to bring up any new testimony. The court was very clear about that. But certainly any member of the public has the ability to listen in on this. After Mr. Higgins reads his report and the board makes a determination as to what conditions to impose, then a resolution of memorialization will be prepared by my office in the normal course, and then that will be published. and then action may be taken or not in the normal course. Find anybody interested. Mr. Chairman, do you have any questions about the background on this before we ask Mr. Higgins?
No, not at all.
Okay,
I'm ready
then we
to
can get
proceed.
Mr. Higgins.
Okay. Yeah, I'll go through the list of suggested conditions. Just for the record, I did review the entire court decision, the minutes of the board hearings, listened to the CDs of both the board hearings, reviewed Bill Fitzgerald's reports and comments, and also reviewed my reports to the board on this application. I suggest a number of conditions. The first would be a tree location plan should be provided that identifies any existing trees 6 inches or greater on the entire lot, and a tree location and preservation plan shall be submitted and approved prior to removal of the existing residence and or garage and any construction on either lot. Such tree location preservation plan shall be subject to the approval of the board planner. The second one would be, as recommended by the applicant's attorney at the July 23rd, 2020 hearing, a deed restriction could be applied to each new lot that prohibits the consolidation of the two lots into one lot at any time in the future. This is justifiable due to the findings, testimony of the applicant's planner, and the finding by the court that the subdivision of the property is a significantly better planning alternative than maintaining the site as a single developable parcel. The third would be several of recommendations in Bill's report, which is: one, the applicant posts an acceptable bond and or complete demolition of existing on-site improvements. Two, the applicant shall demonstrate via soil testing and or analysis to the satisfaction of the board engineer that impacts of added impervious coverage can be fully mitigated. And three, the applicant shall form a homeowners association for ongoing maintenance of stormwater management installations associated with the subdivision, the completed documents for which shall be finalized to the satisfaction of the board attorney. And then finally, there are two other possible conditions that the board could include. One would be that a number of the board members expressed concern over the potential height of the buildings as compared to the prevailing height of the buildings in the neighborhood, so that the board can make an informed decision on the site. It is necessary to understand the ordinance height requirement. The building height is limited to 35 feet to the highest point of the building and is measured from the elevation of the first story above grade, which can be as high as 4.5 feet above grade at the front of the building. Consequently, the height of the building can be as much as 39.5 feet above the grade at the front of the building and higher on the side and rear. Most of the houses in the neighborhood are clearly between 20 and 30 feet in height, measured from the grade level in front of the building. This observation is based on the assumption that each story is 9 feet high, and most houses in the neighborhood are 1 or 2 stories with a roof that is approximately 2/3 the height of 1 story. Consequently, a building that maximizes the height according to the ordinance could be considerably higher than any building in the neighborhood. Given the narrow width of the lots, it would not be inappropriate for the board to limit the building height on these two lots to 30 feet, which would result in a maximum height above grade of 34.5 feet at the front of the building. While it might be more desirable to limit the height to less than 30 feet, given the lack of specific information on building heights in the neighborhood, a lower height might be difficult to justify to the court. This requirement could be part of a deed restriction if the board so desires. And then finally, the board also discussed, and the applicant agreed, to require a 15-foot side yard setback on the west side of lot 9.01. The reason for this is to address any concerns of the adjacent neighbor on lot 10 may have. I do not see a downside to this, but must advise the board that there is no real planning reason to do so.
Thank you, Mr. Higgins. Does anybody from the board have any questions for Mr. Higgins' report?
So Jim, is this the first time the applicant has seen the suggestion on the 30-foot?
I don't know.
Okay.
The report's been in for a while, so I don't know if it was disseminated to the applicant or the applicant's attorney. And I don't even know if they're here tonight.
Well, first of all, they wouldn't be permitted to comment. Second of all, I'm not personally aware of them being provided it in advance. There would be a reason not to, in light of the fact that the property owners who appeared of interest would not have had the ability to receive it. So I surmise that this is the first time that both the applicant and any members of the public have heard this information. But again, it's up to the board to make a determination based on what we've heard tonight from Mr. Higgins and what you might recall from the hearing as to what conditions you want to impose upon the court-ordered grant of the approval.
But what I remember about it also, Jim, was that that the idea of having two homes was also something in that one spot, was that everything was getting crowded into that area, and there was just a lot of cars and a lot of traffic and in those things. Is there anything that we can do to address that situation?
Not really. I don't, you can require that there be more parking spaces on each site, but if you do that, it's going to take up more impervious surface, which could be a detriment in terms of drainage and so on. It's very hard to control something like that, to do it in a way that the court's going to accept.
Is that what you remember from the tapes, that was a thing?
I do know that a number of residents of the area commented in that regard.
Yeah, right.
Anyone
Okay.
else have anything to say?
But Sandy, we're trying to figure out if all of Jim's suggestions, we should say yes and see if those get approved by the court. Is that the deal?
No, we have the right and obligation to determine what conditions that we want to apply to the grant. What I'd suggest is that someone could offer a motion and could list whether or not you want to accept all of the conditions that were mentioned by Mr. Higgins, or you could indicate that all would be imposed except for whatever you wouldn't want to have imposed that Mr. Higgins suggested as possible. Also, in theory, you could come up with new conditions that were not mentioned by Mr. Higgins, but I suggest that a motion be offered and proposed findings of fact as conditions be part of the motion. You can debate it further if you want. You could have a second on it and then vote on it, see if it passes.
I'll make a motion. I would make a motion to follow all of Jim's recommendations, as well as the restriction in the height and for the side back setback for the neighbor.
That'd be the 15-foot side setback on the west side of lot 9.01.
Correct.
So is there a second to that?
I'll second.
And who was that?
Dr. Fisher.
Dr. Fisher? And Dr. De Benedetto, you could ask for any debate on that, or you could just call it for a
Anybody
vote.
want any offer of any other information from the board members? Any discussion? Then let's go to a vote.
Roll call.
Mr. DeCilia,
Yes.
Mr. Duffy,
Yes.
Mr. Fisher,
Yes.
Mr. Good.
Absent.
Yes. Ms. Close,
Yes.
Mr. Sayano,
Yes.
Mr. Weinstein,
Yes.
Chairman Di Benedetto.
Yes.
It passes, as I indicated in the beginning, that vote will be inserted into resolution memorialization, and we'll have that voted upon at the next regular meeting of the board, which will be in December.
Okay, our next case is Logan Community LLC, Block 137, lots 4, 5, and 32, 1109 Logan Road, Ocean C3. This application is for construction of a funeral home with necessary variances for parking, driveway location, landscaping, fencing, and signage. Attorney for the applicant is Jennifer Krimko. Ms. Krimko?
Good evening. Do I call you Doctor, Mr. Chair, or just?
Whatever you, chair, doctor, whatever you want to do, it's fine. Chairman.
Good evening, Your Excellency. Welcome as the board chair. Jennifer Krimko from the law firm of Van Silgrim and Aaron, here on behalf of the applicant. Before we kick in, I'd just like to take one moment to give a quick summary, if that's okay, to bring everybody.
You could do that just quickly. We talked about in the caucus that we would hear our professionals' reports on the revisions. So I'll give you a few minutes to summarize, and then we'll go to that. Is that okay with you?
Sure. I was hoping to just do a grand setting the stage so everybody understood, but whatever is your pleasure. I'll defer to Bill and Jim as to whether or not what they think would be the best way to proceed.
Well, I think it's okay. Go ahead, summarize, and then we'll.
Okay, great. Thank you. So, as you may remember, when it seems like a lifetime ago, we appeared before you on March 2nd for the first time, and it was right before COVID. And at the hearing, there were some issues that were raised because we needed a parking variance. And as a result, we were required to mitigate that by parking across Logan Road in the public parking that was available. We met with Bill and Jim in tech review on March 11th. We submitted revised plans on March 12th, and we were all ready for a hearing on, I think it was March 18th, and lo and behold, the whole world got shut down. It was just until this past hearing when our state legislature adopted regulations that basically provided that virtual hearings are acceptable, and any public can't really claim deficiency in notice based on it being virtual, which is why we're proceeding here tonight. Because it's been so long, and because I think a lot of what was said then might have been lost, I just want to go through who I have here tonight and what I expect to have them testify. If you may remember, the last architect was Orthodox Jewish and provided a lot of the use description for the funeral home. But instead tonight, now that we have a second bite at the apple, so to speak, I have with me tonight Daniel Sultan. He's the president of Congregation Rodfez Zedek, and that is a non-for-profit organization that supervises and prepares for funerals and burials in the community for the Jewish religion. I'm going to have him briefly go through again the limitations on our proposed use. And as the board may remember, there were concerns about when funerals were going to be in relation to other uses, and there are some pretty strict restrictions on when Orthodox Jewish funerals can be. So I'm going to have him talk about that a little bit. I've met Sharo, who is the project engineer. He has revised the plans based on all of Bill and Jim's suggestions at the last meeting, as well as some additional changes that we made. While we worked on the stormwater management, we did not submit anything formally yet because both Matt and Bill have been going back and forth with that, and obviously we don't want to expend the time and money perfecting a stormwater design until we have a layout perfected. So he'll talk about the layout changes and the variances implicated. I do have the project architect, not the same one, Shimon, who was here last time, but Tom McHugh, who can talk about the changes to the building, which are not very many. And then finally, I have Leah Fury-Bruder here. She's a licensed professional planner and serves in as capacity as the township planner in certain municipalities. And she's going to go through and talk about the variance relief and the justifications for it. In sum, the application's been revised to address a lot of the concerns from the board's professionals and the public. The most significant being that the area devoted to assembly, meaning the sanctuary with the permanent seating within the funeral home upon which the parking calculation is generated, has been reduced in size such that we no longer need a parking variance. So that's the significant change. I will tell the board up front and you're going to hear through testimony of how large funerals would be handled if the board deems it necessary, or Phil and Jim deem it necessary, even though we will not be relying on any off-site parking as part of our application, we would be willing to put in whatever signage along Logan Road Bill or Jim felt was necessary regardless. So it's not that we're not willing to do that. So with all of that, I think that brings us back now, obviously, turn it back over and we can go through the particulars and then have my witnesses jump in and start addressing the comments in the letters.
Mr. Chair, before we go to our professionals, I'd like to ask Ms. Krimko a couple of preliminary questions. So the hearing took place in March. It's been a long time, as you indicated. Of course, before any of the board members could vote on this, they would have had to have listened to the testimony from March or have listened to a tape, right? Right?
No, legally, no. I think all of the board members who are here tonight were here in March, so they're all eligible.
And that's what I'm going to. They either have to have been there in March or listen to a tape. You're indicating that.
Sorry, I misunderstood, Sandy.
All the members who are on screen tonight were there in March, right?
They were.
So,
I did that comparison during your workshop.
Excellent. That's all I wanted to confirm.
And just one last thing, just I don't remember if this board does it, that you've reviewed the notice.
We didn't mention it tonight. That's usually done by our secretary who absent. I'll look to Mr. Kirk to ask for whether or not, Mr. Kirk, you can confirm that the notice provisions were complied with.
I can confirm.
Thank you. Okay.
Why don't we start with Mr. Higgins?
That's okay. Mr. Chairman, just a quick question. Are we going to limit this to 1 hour tonight, the way we normally do?
I guess so.
Yeah, because based on what Ms. Krimko was saying, there may be some testimony that's going to be given that's going to change or not change my report to the board. And it may be better to let their professionals make their presentation tonight so that Bill and I can then react and advise the board more clearly rather than give the reports up at the beginning. It might make more sense in terms of, that's up to you as a chair.
My understanding is though, if I get it correctly, my understanding is your reports are based on the revised plans, correct?
That's correct. That's correct.
So
Well, yes and no. What I did, Mr. Chairman, is I just, knowing that it's been about 8 months since we had a hearing, I really just made a list of items that I thought needed to be addressed during a public hearing by the applicant, because they were things that the board talked about at the prior hearing, or things that maybe hadn't been addressed all the way and needed to be. So I didn't get into a lot of pros and cons. I just made a list, sort of like here are a lot of the issues out there that you need to look at.
okay, so I don't have a problem to defer to Jennifer, Ms. Krimko's case and have her proceed if that's okay with the board professionals and they feel like you would want to revise your reports after that, or at least talk about it today.
That may very well happen. I don't see us finishing tonight. I don't see it happening at all.
I'm fine with that.
You have to testify.
I'm fine with it.
Ms. Krimko, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And are there other matters, just as a matter of housekeeping? We did notice for the last hearing and we were ready to go forward at the last hearing, and unfortunately what we thought was going to be the first live hearing never occurred, and now we're back another month. Are there other matters on after this? Is there a way that we can apportion a little bit more than an hour in the hopes that we can get through everything quickly and finish?
Why don't we get started? It's 8 o'clock right now.
So
let's rock and roll.
Okay, then let me get started. So we left off as A6. So I'd like to move in as A7 as the site plan prepared by Dynamic Engineering, and that's revised through 9/16/20. A8 are the architectural plans prepared by MMA Architects, and those are revised through 9/15/20. I will need Jen or Ron at some point if they could allow me to share my screen for when my witnesses come up, because we did submit a packet in advance, but I need to be able to share my screen in order to show them to you.
I believe that all of the board members got the packet.
Right, but the public,
I know
the public did not. Right.
Correct.
So I was told that I would be able to share my screen, so I'm just giving fair warning that I'll need to. So A9 is an aerial map exhibit prepared by Dynamic Engineering, dated 10/26/20. And A10 is the site plan rendering prepared by Dynamic Engineering, dated 10/26/20. The other reduced picture in the packet was just what I previously moved in as A8, so I don't need to move that in. So what I'd like to call first is Daniel Sultan, have him sworn or affirm, and introduce himself, and we'll walk through the proposed operations of the funeral home.
All right, there's Mr. Sultan. Would you raise your right hand? Do you promise to tell the truth, the whole truth, or to affirm that the testimony you're going to give will be the full truth tonight?
Yes, I do.
Are you affirming or swearing?
I'm affirming.
Okay, very good.
swearing.
Thank you. All right, go ahead.
All right, so Daniel, your name, just state your name and properly state the organization that I may have not said the name correctly in the beginning.
You did great, Jennifer.
Thank you.
I'm Daniel Sultan. I'm the president of, the name of the organization is Congregation Rodfer Zedek. I'm actually the fourth generation that runs this organization. We have a board of about 5 or 6 people. And we've been taking care of the community's burial needs for maybe over 120 years. The process, I was talking to Jennifer about this, the process.
Well, before you go into the process, I just want to explain. So you're not part of the organization that's going to own the funeral home, right? You're more or less so how does your organization work with the various funeral homes in the area when there is a death in the Jewish community that subscribes to the Orthodox traditions?
Right. So if someone passes away and we're going to be using a funeral home in the area, we have community men that actually make the pickup of a deceased at the hospital, the house, wherever it may be, and they bring them to the funeral home. We have a thing in the Jewish faith. We do a cleansing of the deceased, and that's before a funeral service, and then before.
And Daniel, the people who do that are part of your organization, correct?
They're part of my organization. Yes, they work gratis, also like me. They're just
right.
Yeah.
And I'm going to interrupt a couple of times just to bring everybody back to March. The board may remember there was discussion about no real permanent employees of the funeral home per se, that the whole funeral process is guided by a group of organized volunteers. And it was hard for the board to understand, which is part of the reason why I brought Daniel, since they've been doing it for 110 years and he's 4th generation. You basically come in and take care of the process from beginning to end. Is that right, Daniel? I think Daniel froze. Daniel, you froze for a second there. I can't hear you.
I lost you. Oh, I think everyone froze. Was it me? Sorry.
Okay.
Oh, you can't hear me now?
No, now I can. So you basically come in and from the time you pick up the body until the burial, your organization handles everything.
My organization handles everything. Yes, we try to make it easy for the family. on when someone passes away. We make it easy, seamless. This way the family doesn't have to worry about it, and everything's taken care of. We have graves, we have the contract with the funeral home, we have the men or the woman that do the cleansing, we have the car, everything's provided, everything's done, everything's a system that's pretty flawless, and it's been working pretty well.
Okay, and in the Jewish faith, the body needs to be buried as immediately as possible after the death.
Yes, within hours most of the time. Within hours. If someone passes away in the middle of the night, they'll be buried before lunchtime. That's 90% of the time.
Okay, and there was testimony at the last meeting that there'll be no funerals in the dark at all, and that's why lighting wasn't necessary in the parking lot other than security lighting. Is that accurate?
That's very accurate, yes, because the cemetery is actually closed at dusk. So, yeah, we can't go bury.
So since you were members of your family, basically been handling the burials of the Orthodox community in the Eastern Jersey Shore area for all these years, typically, and again, I know that, every year could be different, but typically speaking, how many people attend an average funeral?
I think we said probably between 80, 90, less than 100 on an average on an average funeral. Many funerals are a lot less. Yes.
Okay, and is part of the reason that the funeral is not the only, isn't really the time when the congregation or the friends can pay their respects to the family? How does it work in the Jewish faith?
So if the people actually miss the funeral, because a lot of times it's very short notice. A lot of times I'm on the way to work and we got a message that someone had passed away. So if you miss the funeral, we have 7 days of mourning, 7 days of sitting shiva. So you get to visit the family and you have more intimate time during those 7 days. You talk to them, but at a funeral, everyone's lost, for lack of a better word. They're
Okay.
just shocked. So they have the whole week to really pay their respects.
Okay, and so that's as part of COVID and the fact that there were so many limitations on people being able to gather. Have you noticed a change or a trend on how you think funerals are going to go going forward?
Absolutely, absolutely. We put in live streams, and we do a lot of live stream funerals, and the people are taking to it, and I see that to be a trend. I see it to be a trend that people are going to be logging in like this type of thing now, to log in and see a funeral that way. As opposed to, you're still going to have people visiting, coming to a live funeral, that's for sure. But there's going to be a lot of people that are going to opt for the live stream.
Okay, and importantly, if a prominent member of the community, if God forbid a child or a rabbi passes, there would be an unusual funeral where there might be a much larger turnout. I'm assuming that over the last 4 generations, you've experienced those also.
Absolutely, it happens. It's
Okay.
natural. It's natural.
Okay, and how often in the community would you say that happens?
Once or twice a year, maybe.
Okay.
An extreme large funeral, yeah.
So in order to accommodate that, recognizing that no funeral home is set up to accommodate a crowd that is packing the funeral home, and that's no matter what the religion is. As an organization, how do you prepare? How do you ensure safety for the people attending, that there's no traffic issues or anything else? You get in touch with the police department?
Absolutely. We always get in touch with the police department. We do that, and they always work with us. And we also hire private security to be there at every funeral. Yeah.
So if the board were going to impose a condition that if there was any time that a large funeral that would exceed the parking capability, even though we meet the ordinance, that you'd have to coordinate with the police department and make sure that the Ocean Township Police Department was at the funeral and directing, much like they do the high holidays for the various synagogues. Would that be something that you could work with?
Absolutely, no problem. We do it. We do it. Yeah.
Okay. I think that Mr. Chair, I'm sorry, Dr. Chair, I tried to kind
Mr.
of hit on
Chair,
all of the, I'm sorry?
Mr. Chair is okay.
I feel like it's not, but I'll try. I tried to hit on all of the issues that came up the last time and, to give a succinct summary of the operations. As the board remembered at the last meeting, the concerns were, well, just because this funeral home is operating this way doesn't mean everyone would. And what we offered was, well, if the board were to grant these variances that we're seeking, and you'll hear more from the planner and the engineer, the basis for it is the type of funeral home that it is and the limited usage and the limited services that they have. So I think you could be comfortable that if the board were to approve this, these conditions would apply for any funeral user going forward, as far as just during the day, no Saturdays, no evening funerals at all. So I would open Mr. Sultan to questions by the board if they have any.
So I have a question. So you show revised room that you made smaller, but you're still asking for 454 seats. And your expert just testified that, you need 80 to 90 on average. Why do you need 454 seats?
That's for me or for Jennifer? Because there are times
Well,
that we would.
it's. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Jennifer
And you
or
raised
Dan?
a good point, Dr. Benedetto, for a follow-up question for me. Why do you propose so many seats, Daniel?
Okay, so you actually asked me that, the larger funerals, but you didn't ask me that question. You said, because the larger funerals, we do have 350 to 400 seats. The average funerals are probably less than 100, And, but there are some that are 350, 400.
And that leads me to my next question that I forgot that Dr. Benedetto reminded me of. Typically, how many people, now your family's been doing this before there were automobiles, but in your lifetime doing this, do people come by themselves? Is there one car per funeral attendee? How does it usually work for a funeral within your community?
Listen, it's a funeral, so most people, they get together, they converge, families get together and jump in a car together and go to the funeral. I personally, I walk out of my house, sometimes one of my neighbors, we drive together. It very, very often, the cars are packed, usually 3-4 people in a car, definitely.
Okay, so the size of the funeral home is to accommodate the several times, the few times a year where there would be a large crowd, so there would be room to accommodate a large funeral for a prominent individual. But in your experience, that is not the norm. That's the exception.
No, 400 people is not a normal, no.
Can I say something? Can I ask a question?
Sure.
Yeah, so I understand that that periodically there'll be a lot of you're expecting periodically there may be bigger crowds, right?
It can happen.
That's what right.
Yeah,
You can't
yes, it will happen.
can't predict it. Right, it will happen. Probably the thing that I would be just mathematically concerned about is we got to this point because obviously there's more of these services required in our community, which means that the slope of these services and maybe the slope of the number of instances that will require bigger crowds is going to increase, right? So if we went back 5-6 years ago, this might not have been something that you felt was needed, but because the community has been built up, now it's something you feel you need, and therefore mathematically you can kind of, you want to get a little bit thinking ahead that when you extrapolate, you could have more of these aberrations, and you really have a hard time predicting how many of these instances occur, right?
Can I Can I think before he
Is that
answers.
is that a fair assessment?
No,
though?
it isn't, and that's why I'm jumping in, because I think you made some mischaracterizations that I just want to clarify for the record.
Sure.
A couple of things. There was testimony at the last meeting. This is not to service because we expect more deaths or bigger deaths or more people per se. This is because the only other Jewish funeral home in the area, the Bloomfield Cooper Funeral Home, was not sufficient for this community's needs based on its layout and lack of parking of any real appreciable kind, and where it's located. Additionally, Bloomfield Cooper services a lot bigger of a segment of the population where this is really going to be geared towards Jewish orthodoxy. So I think that needs to be clarified. And I don't think that more funerals necessarily means bigger funerals, but even in the biggest funeral, for the area devoted to assembly space, the congregation area with the permanent seats, we meet the parking requirement. So even if they did fill every seat in that assembly room, we meet the township's parking requirement for that. So,
Jennifer,
yes.
remind me, please, because it's been a while, how many spaces do they have available
I'm
around?
gonna have to defer that for our engineer who's gonna be up next.
Okay.
Okay, I want Daniel to just talk about the operations and to clarify some of the things and to remind you. But, and now, Daniel, now that I clarify that base, because you weren't at the last hearing.
Right.
And Daniel isn't the one building this funeral home. That's the other clarification. So again, he can't speak as to the organization building the building. He only can speak to his organization that takes care of the bodies.
Mm-hmm. But you have to assume that that we're looking for this because the volume has increased.
So Jennifer, let me
Go ahead.
add to that, Mr. Weinstein. I have to say that it's a crazy stat. Take Corona out of the picture, but for the last 10, 15 years, we had the same amount of burials within less than 10%. Aside for this year. This year, granted, it was a crazy year, but this year, and actually this year, take out the Corona 2-3 months, we're having the same amount of burials. It's a crazy stat because people are actually living longer. So it's weird. It's weird for someone like me that has to plan for the future like this. I can't believe that the number is the same.
And again, Daniel, is it even though you're not part of the organization that's building this funeral home, you are part of the community that it's going to serve. Would it be accurate to say that this is more about building a high level, beautiful?
Yes. A high level
facility to suit the community as opposed to the need based on demand.
Exactly. Yes. And also to help in the behind the scenes, the cleansing purposes and all that stuff is also is a beautification process for us. It's a way to honor the deceased in a very, very special way. It's going to be a beautiful, beautiful building, and it's going to be done very nicely.
I have a question.
Go ahead, Mr.
How many funerals are we talking about approximately are you doing right now in different locations?
What we went through in the Jersey Shore, I believe it was about 15 over the past couple of years. It's only that number. I mean, of course we anticipate it to go up, but it's not going to, quadruple. It's not going to double even in many, long time.
Yeah, but now that this facility is available, this might become the destination funeral home.
No, because I personally I take care of people, our members. I'm not looking to make money. I'm just I work gratis for the community. I do everything, I make arrangements with funeral homes. We make contracts with them so we could do the best for our community. I'm not looking to make money.
But Daniel,
Yeah.
Even if there was a funeral every day, even if people from all over the world decided they wanted to use this funeral home.
I don't want to be involved.
No, but I'm just saying, it's a permitted use
Yeah, for sure.
and we meet the parking requirement. So certainly, even with a funeral every day during daylight hours, it's less intense than a restaurant with a bar.
I need to interrupt you, Ms. Krimko. You keep on saying that you meet the parking requirements, provided you get all the variances, correct? The buffer.
No. There are other variances required. As the plan sits before you, we meet the parking requirement. There are other variances that are required, but parking is not one of them.
Can I interject there? I don't think there's enough testimony on the record at this point to say whether or not that statement is correct, Jennifer. There's a lot of wasted space in this building. There's a lot of space that could be utilized for the assembly and for the services that we need testimony as to how this place is going to function. That's what I thought you were going to be bringing Mr. Sultan in to discuss. And he's really talking in generalities. He's not talking about the specifics of the function of this building. I don't think the board,
Well,
I can't determine whether or not you meet the parking requirement at this point with the amount of information that's been presented.
Well, Bill, I'm sorry, Jim, the way the ordinance is written, it speaks about areas devoted to assembly use.
Yes, and what's not to say that this very large lobby, which is huge, would not be devoted to assembly at certain times during very, very large funerals. That additional chairs wouldn't be brought in, wouldn't be put in the lobby. You have waiting rooms, you have the chapel, I would say probably wouldn't be, but you have a waiting room and you have a very, very large lobby. And I think that's the type of information the board needs. That's what I was hoping to hear, which is why
we're going to get there. We're going to get there, but you're talking about a strict interpretation of the ordinance, the way the ordinance is written versus in practicality. The same way in Christmas time, I'm sure for midnight mass, when the prayer area fills, there might be extra chairs put in I don't want to start making up names of the different rooms that might be in a church, but there may be more people than is typically there. So yes, there absolutely may be a circumstance where there are overflow people in an area that's not typically devoted to assembly.
And the concern is, and this hasn't been touched on at all, and Bill and I have discussed this a great deal in our review of this application.
Well, we're only on our first witness.
I know, but the fact is, even in the prior hearings, there's been talk you're not going to have Saturday services. There has been no mention about Sunday services, and the fact that you do have a banquet facility directly across Logan Road. What's going to happen on a June day when there is a large wedding at that banquet facility and there is a very large funeral at this facility and there is overflow parking?
Before we get to that, it was addressed in great detail by our traffic engineer at the last hearing. And there was an analysis of...
I don't remember it at all. I'm not talking about Sundays.
Neither do I.
Okay, well, again, there was analysis of the size of the banquet facility, the amount of parking that they had, what the ordinance required for that size banquet facility, and what their needs would be. That was Justin Taylor. He gave all of that testimony, and what the excess parking on the street was. Now, they're not allowed to rely on that on-street parking any more than we are. So I'm not sure.
No, I understand that. But the fact is that if there's more cars that can be parked on both sites, what's going to happen? And that's the concern. And I think it's a major concern.
So again, first, let Daniel.
That's why. And that's dealt with in my report too. And the other issue.
Well, you asked the question, so let's let him answer. So Daniel, weddings are typically on the funerals are typically held on a Sunday on the mornings, correct? So I think there was testimony so they could get the bodies to the grave.
Oh, funerals. I thought you said wedding.
No.
Yes, funerals are generally in the morning on Sunday, especially on Sunday. Well, they're usually in the morning, but especially on Sunday because the cemeteries actually close by noon. I mean, sometimes we could, get them to stay open a few hours. There's times that it does happen, but generally we're in the morning.
So if you were to have a funeral on a Sunday, what would be the time frame? If they were going to if the board was going to limit you and say, we don't want you to conflict with weddings that may be happening at lunchtime, if you had to wrap up funerals by noon, would that be something you could live with as a condition?
I don't know about a condition, but I'm comfortable to say it would very rarely happen. Very rarely happen. Well, generally, our funerals start at 9:30 or 10 a.m. That's like the general rule. It's like if someone asks me, what do you suggest? I suggest the earlier, the better.
Okay, and how long do they typically go?
30 minutes, 45 minutes.
So in your opinion,
that's average. Sometimes you go longer, but in general,
okay.
30, 45 minutes.
So if a wedding party starts at lunchtime, starts at noon, 1 o'clock, you'll be gone by then.
We would be gone, yes. Yes.
So, Ms. Krimko, are you going to stipulate that you would not have any funerals ending past noon?
Is noon appropriate or would 1 o'clock be more appropriate? Daniel?
Are you asking me? I mean, I don't know if you want to stipulate something like that because it might happen once in a blue moon. But I would say yes, it's safer to say 1 o'clock. But I don't. That's not a concern of mine. Most Sundays are in the morning.
So
what about the other days of the week?
The other days, most days are during. 90% of the funerals are done at 9:30, 10 o'clock in the morning. There are some that are done a little bit later. Sometimes it depends on the timing of the passing, but the morning covers everyone that passed away from the day before in the afternoon because we can't get to the cemetery in time. So it in turn leaves us to the morning. Also,
but
people
again, that's not a concern, I don't think, Sandy, because if Sunday weddings are the concern here, that's really the only conflict that I mean, I don't think there's any big weddings during the week at noon.
I don't think it would be an issue. I'm
all right.
comfortable.
Ultimately, you don't make the decision as to what we stipulate. So you offered your testimony that we can be out of there by 1 o'clock, and he's confident that that can occur.
I just wanted to ask, he said, Daniel, you said that average between 30 and 45 minutes for a service?
Yeah.
So that means below average could be 15 minutes?
There actually are some that are 15 minutes if it's a very small crowd, 10, 20, 30 people, and one speaker. That does happen, but it's not.
I have to be honest with you. I don't believe you. I really don't. It's impossible for 15 minutes.
Mr. Chair, with respect, I don't know how many Orthodox Jewish funerals you've gone to, but on behalf of my witness, he's speaking under affirmation. He's been doing this his entire lifetime and for 4 generations. And okay. I don't think it's fair to say I don't believe you when he's offering sworn testimony.
Okay.
I'd like to just add something. So Jennifer, the real Ms. Krimko, the real.
You can call me Jen.
Okay, the real thing is that it's hard to figure out. We're all talking about what the disruption is going to be to the community, to the traffic, to the other establishments in the area, right?
No, we're not. We're actually not, Mr. Weinstein, because this is a permitted use.
I understand, but that's why we're asking about. That's why we're asking about how big is the crowd's going to be.
The question as to how big should be only to what the parking requirements are going to be, not to disruption and not to traffic.
And just to emphasize, the ordinance requirement for parking is a minimum requirement. It's not the requirement. If there are 456 seats inside that facility and the board feels that those number of seats cannot be accommodated by the number of parking spaces, I think the board can make a decision that there's not enough parking, even though a variance isn't required. And my court may have to decide that.
Right,
Right.
I don't agree with that interpretation, but okay.
I know you don't. I know you don't. Can I ask Mr. Sultan one other question? Because you obviously are involved in these types of funerals for many, many years. Do you ever have a situation where you have to bring in police to help direct traffic and to help maintain public safety? Like, I know there's concern of the board where if there's overflow and it goes across Logan Road, that people are going to have to walk across Logan Road. That may not be a safe situation. And where I'm going is it possible to get police out there to help with a situation when somebody dies, say at 10 o'clock at night, and you want to bury him, you want to have the service completed by noon the next day?
The question is, what is the question? If I can get police service help?
Yeah, police there. Have you ever been in a situation
have
where
we done it? Yes, we have had help from the police. We're in Ocean now, up Route 35, and there were times if we expected a big funeral, a large funeral, we did call the police. They put a police car at the edge of the ramp, and they just defer traffic, I think. We can work with the police department. It's not a big deal. I think they'd be more than happy to help us.
But Jim, I had said that early in the beginning, and we did confirm that regardless of when it would be, Daniel would coordinate with the police and ensure that there'd be adequate protection there.
Yes, okay, I missed that.
Sorry.
Back to the doctor's comment about the small funerals. There's obviously small funerals, you know, it's not the normal, but there are some that are small.
Well, Daniel, let me ask a question, and I think part of what might be missing is when there's a small funeral and there's just the family there, does the service sometimes occur graveside as opposed to in the funeral home, where you would gather at the funeral home, get the body after it had been prepared, have a few words, and then the actual service would occur graveside?
Yes, it does happen.
I would say that in these times, things are definitely different, especially, you know, with funerals, I'm sure, and also with weddings. I mean, people are postponing their weddings and postponing to 2021 and 22, and there are no weekends available. They're all having weddings during the week. So I think that the issue with traffic and safety is still a prominent issue with this application.
Are there any other questions for Daniel?
Yeah, I have a follow-up to Mr. Weinstein's question. So, Daniel, if that's how you like to be called, the reason for this funeral parlor, of course, is because it's a beautiful building, as you said, right? But correct?
Yeah, a beautiful building and a beautiful way to honor the deceased in the preparation rooms and
Right.
also the chapel room. Yes.
But is it also not because there's more of a demand from the Orthodox community?
I don't see a larger demand year over year that we need this, but I do see the need for a little bigger place where we are than we are today, and a place that can honor the deceased a little bit nicer. We have the cleansing room and all that preparation rooms before.
Well, right. So, for example, this board recently granted an expansion for two wonderful buildings over at Hillel. You're familiar with that, as I'm sure.
Sure.
So it would be fair to say that there will be a lot more students from the Orthodox community that would plan to attend. Isn't that fair to say?
Absolutely.
So it would be fair to say that there should be an increase in the Orthodox community who would be moving in so that they could take advantage of the expanded availability at Hillel. Wouldn't that be fair to say?
I would guess so, yes.
So because
Sandy.
of that, Yes.
I'm getting close. I don't know that I can object to the board attorney, but I'm teetering close to having objection. So can we
your
direct this to his expertise as it relates to the preparation and burial of bodies and not on the Sephardic community as a
I would
whole?
raise it because you didn't offer him just to talk about process. You've asked him many questions about the number of funerals and the sizes of funerals.
Correct.
And Mr. Weinstein's question in part was, well, what about expected demand? And I didn't hear him talk about that. And that's what I'm trying to get at. If there is an anticipation of increased activity expected over time because of a greater need as the Orthodox community expands. That's my question.
Thank you, Sandy.
Yeah,
Did I hit the nail on the head there, Mr. Weinstein?
Yes, that's what I was trying to get to, right?
Yeah.
Right, but
And that's my question.
and he again, I think he answered it. I'm going to let Daniel answer
Well,
it.
I'm going to ask him to answer it. We can
Okay,
debate
but
Jennifer.
but before that,
Let him talk.
I just want to point something out. The reason Hillel is expanding is not because there's more families that are in this area. It's just more families that are in the area year round. There's a big distinction here. So the families that are here in the summertime are now becoming year-round residents.
Right.
So
Well,
the population.
you're making is, let's assume that's the case. So if the families who are only here in the summer are going to be here for the school year, I'll ask Daniel, isn't it logical to say then there would be more of a need because rather than people from the community going back to Brooklyn, they will be here for 12 months a year. And therefore, if it's more logical, there's going to be more deaths in the community for 12 months a year rather than the way it's been more so than not. Is that fair to say?
it's a good question, Mr. Brown, but I want to say, like I told Mr. Weinstein, I feel like it's a crazy stat that I said I was going to tell you, and it really didn't waver over or under 10%. Only.
No, I understand that, Daniel, but again, that's based.
Am I thinking there's going to be a need in the future?
Yeah.
I don't think that the foreseeable future will be a dramatic change to have even double the amount of burials in the foreseeable 30 years. I don't see it to double in that time from my experience over the last 15.
I don't know how you can.
Why is it relevant how many funerals there are? Just, you're asking the question, so I'm going to ask a question to you. Why is the number of funerals relevant if the concern is safety and the concern is the ability to adequately
I'm glad to debate it with you, Jennifer. The answer is that we've heard Daniel talk about the number of large funerals to make it whole. So if there aren't too many large funerals, but we're talking about a particular volume, if the volume doubles, for example, just hypothetically, then wouldn't it be logical to say that the number of larger funerals where there could be a safety problem also would likely to double? That's the reason. And if Daniel doesn't think that's the case, then fine. But that's one of the main reasons for it. Do you have an answer to that, Daniel?
It's a good question, but my experience in large funerals over my experience working in this Holy Burial Society is really only a couple a year.
Wait. But let's clarify. You don't just do it in the Jersey Shore. In the wintertime, you do it in Brooklyn as well.
Yes.
So you serve this community 12 months a year.
Yes, and this year we did not have a large funeral.
Your numbers and your experience is not just based on the community in the Jersey Shore. It's based on the Sephardic Orthodox community that you serve 12 months a year.
Yes.
All right, Daniel, let's clarify. What is the scope of your community then, please?
Where is the scope?
Yes, please.
The Brooklyn and the Jersey Shore. Jersey Shore and Brooklyn, yes. Some Manhattan, but mostly Jersey Shore and Brooklyn.
So in the scope of your volunteer services, do you handle most of Brooklyn or the folks that come down here in the summer? Or?
I handle the community that comes down to the Jersey Shore. I handle Brooklyn for the Sephardic community. That's it. I don't handle any different organizations, any different sects. We strictly the Sephardic community.
But the Sephardic community that attends Hillel, that is growing in population, you already serve them in Brooklyn, correct?
Yes.
So it's the same people. So the statistics you're giving are year-round statistics, whether it's at the Jersey Shore or in Brooklyn.
Absolutely.
So the fact that more of them may be living in the Jersey Shore over Brooklyn doesn't change your numbers.
No. And as far as the Jersey Shore large funerals, we haven't had any. As far as safety, I just want to comment on myself running the organization. I was the first, running an organization. I decided there's no more funerals at our funeral homes. I decided that in early March, and they were all graveside for one reason only, for safety. So I'm a stickler when it comes to that. I would make sure that we have the proper security, the proper police help if we had this.
So Daniel, to follow up on that, the assembly room has 400 some odd seats, and we had talked about that, there may be once or twice a year, even 3 times a year, where a great prominent member of the community dies. In your experience, do people stand in the lobby, or would they fill in empty space? And there might be more than the 400 people that are in the assembly room.
Yeah, people would stand, but we would of course make sure it's a compliant code. I don't want any fire hazards. That's the last thing I need.
So in those circumstances, when you know a prominent member has passed and that you're going to merge, that would be the time that you would ensure that the police would be available to help guide traffic and direct and keep everybody safe.
Yes, and beef up security as well.
Actually, that's a great question. What is fire capacity on this building as it stands, or as it's designed?
That would be the architect, so you'll have to wait till we get to him.
Perfect, thank you.
And Daniel, right?
I have another question, a couple other questions. Daniel, so when you mentioned that there were only 1 or 2, I think you call it large funerals a year, is that correct?
That's what I said, yes. Yes, it is.
And what geographical area are you talking about for only 1 or 2 large funerals?
Well, this year we had no large ones on the Jersey Shore. We had no large ones in Brooklyn because of COVID. If there was a large, we always went straight to the cemetery. Since
well, and thanks for clarifying that, because COVID is a hybrid situation, isn't it? But before COVID, when you mentioned 1 or 2, was that in the Jersey Shore area?
I remembering offhand, I don't think we had a large funeral in the Jersey Shore in the last 2 years.
All right, and so how about in Brooklyn? Manhattan and Brooklyn, whatever your jurisdiction is.
We make them over here in Brooklyn. We don't do them in Manhattan. The last large funeral was probably, that I can remember, was a year, like it might have been 2 years ago. One of the big rabbis passed away, and we had a big crowd. I don't know how many.
How many people were at that funeral?
I don't even know the capacity of that facility that we are in. I think it's a few hundred. I think it's 350-ish, and it was standing room only. And yeah, it was, I would guess there's definitely over that, but that was 2 years ago.
Is that, Daniel, Cindy, I guess.
My community, we don't have the funerals you see in the streets with hundreds of people putting speakers outside. We don't do that. We go into either inside the funeral home, inside the chapel. We have it organized. We have a couple of speakers. I'm very strict on that. A couple of speakers. I tell them, sometimes I put in too much of my 2 cents. I tell the speakers to try to speak only 5, 6, 7 minutes and move on, because you want to keep the place moving. My, What?
Just to go back and you know, I understand the board's concern, and I think we went over this at the last meeting. And Sandy, I don't know if it's you or Dr. De Benedetto. You know, this isn't a wedding hall, first of all, but when you take any of the non-Orthodox funeral homes, there are times when someone passes or there is a wake where there's lines down the highway. There's a funeral home on Route 33 where if a child dies or someone important dies, and the police come and guide it. There is not a funeral home on the planet that doesn't fill up and have overflow. And as you're going to hear my planner testify, you don't plan for those unusual circumstances. You can't. You have to be able to accommodate them.
Again, you're making an argument now. I suggested you wait for your planner to give.
I will. All right, you got it.
I have a question. So how many people do you have in your congregation?
I don't have a congregation. It's called congregation. It's the burial society that handles the burial needs.
Not your people. I'm saying, Jennifer, correct me if I'm wrong. This funeral home is going to serve the Orthodox community, correct? Is it going to one group of the Orthodox community, or is it any Orthodox group?
As the testimony was at the last hearing, this funeral home is being constructed by the Sephardic Orthodox community that lives in the Jersey Shore.
Okay.
However, that doesn't mean that they're going to turn away people, but typically, for example, and I'll direct this in the form of a question, Dr. De Benedetto, because I think it'll go to your answer. So, Daniel, in your career and your family's career, I know there's a large Orthodox Jewish community in Lakewood. How often have you provided burial services for that community?
None.
So this funeral home is geared towards, when Dr. Meadow says what congregation, there isn't one congregation. There are several synagogues throughout Eastern Monmouth County that most of the Sephardic community are members of. So there is not one congregation, but the funeral home will service the Sephardic Jewish community in the Eastern Monmouth County area. Is that accurate?
Correct. Yes.
So it's not out for rent for the Lakewood community or the Muncie community or for the Ashkenaz community that will otherwise go to Bloomfield Cooper.
But they still could use this facility.
Yeah, with that in mind, Dan, you wouldn't discriminate against the Hasidic community if they came to you and said, well, you know, we would like to have an Orthodox funeral at the Logan facility, right?
No,
well,
I wouldn't, but it's not mine.
Well, let him answer, please.
I wouldn't discriminate. I help a lot of people all the time.
If they brought their,
let's not have any argument. He's testifying now. If you want to have other people testify, fine. Let him testify.
No. But he is the burial service. So yes, he will turn them away. He won't do it. But if they want to use the building and bring their own burial service and funeral facilitator, then I guess perhaps they could make a discussion with the organization that owns the building. But Daniel serves one community.
Have someone, don't make the argument without having factual testimony. Have someone else testify that, but that's not in the record.
We did. Shimon testified at the last hearing that they're not going to turn people away, that it's not that it can't be used. However, Daniel is not going to prepare the bodies.
Right. Well, because he apparently works with the Sephardic community, but that doesn't mean that you discriminate against the Hasidic community. And that's the point. If you want to have other people testify that you're going to restrict it to the Sephardic community, fine. But I don't recall that being of the record. And the reality here, Jennifer, is that, you know, we're going back to testimony from what, nine months ago? Was that back in March? It is difficult for everybody to try to recall all the minutia. You might want to keep that in mind as you, make final conclusions here as to whether or not you need to bring some witnesses back to clarify. It's up to you.
And
Mr. Chairman.
that's fair, Sandy, but I take umbrage with discriminate because if there's a church and they serve a Catholic community, doesn't mean they're discriminating against Jews or Greek Orthodox. It just means that their charter is to serve the Catholic community. So I don't know if discriminate is the right word.
All right, well, that doesn't have to be used. What I heard Daniel say is that the question related to the scope of the community. That's how it started. So forget that term if you don't think it's proper. So Dr. De Benedetto's question was, what community are you serving? And Daniel clearly indicated that he serves the Sephardic community, but you raised the issue about the Hasidic community. That's how it came up. And there's no testimony, and Daniel didn't indicate that there's a restriction. So if you want to call it restriction or not, maybe it's more of a need to clarify if you're limiting, if you want to call limiting services to just Daniel's community or not. But Dr. De Benedetto, am I correct? And that's why you're asking the question?
Yeah, exactly. I was trying to figure out, are you saying that you're going to put a restriction here and that it's only going to serve one community? That's why I asked you the congregation, just to get clarification, because Daniel clearly represents one congregation or how, I don't know what really is the terminology, but one group of Orthodox Jews, but there are many groups. And are you saying that your funeral home is going to service one group, all the groups? I don't know. He's got statistics for his group. There's 3, 4, 5 other groups that have their statistics, and their statistics piled on his statistics could be totally different. It could be skewed. I just
limiting it to the,
you were the one who brought up the Hasidic communities from Lakewood.
we are limiting it to the Sephardic community. The people building it are members of the Sephardic synagogues in Eastern Monmouth County. We've said from day one that this is an organization to serve the Sephardic Orthodox community. I've been clear about that from day one, which is why I asked Daniel about other Orthodox sects of the Jewish community and whether or not this funeral was serving them.
You just said, excuse me, not to interrupt you, but you just said you would not turn away other groups for funerals outside the community. Now you're saying that's not the case. Which one is it? Are you or are you not?
So I'm at a disadvantage because we're out of a video. I texted my client and said, are you willing to limit this to just the Sephardic community? And the answer was yes. So, and when I said we weren't discriminating against.
Does Mr. Sullivan take care of all of the Sephardic community at the Jersey Shore, or are there other companies like you that would support the Jersey Shore?
No, only my organization.
Only your organization
Yes.
would cover the Jersey Shore.
Yes.
So what we can say is, and I think that it takes the specter of any negative connotation out of it, is we would be willing to limit the funerals that would occur at this funeral home to those serviced by Congregation Rodfe Zedek. They will be our sole provider of burial services at this funeral home. So there is no risk that there would be any other type of funeral other than the type testified to by Mr. Sultan.
Jennifer, could you, for the record, could you either provide that technical name or spell it for the record?
Yes. It's Congregation Rodfeh, Rodfeh, Zedek, Zedek. And I'll get you the entity name and the incorporated name.
Is that a New Jersey legal entity?
Daniel, where were you incorporated?
Rodfeh Zedek is incorporated in New York. The definition of it means purveyors of kindness. That's transliterated. Yeah.
Is that a religious not-for-profit corporation?
Yes. It's listed as a burial society and it's nonprofit. Yes.
Okay.
So just so I get clarification, because now I'm confused again. Are you saying that the funerals will only come through Daniel Sultan's group? Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
You're not saying a particular congregation in the Jersey Shore. You're just saying if they come to Daniel and say, "Hey, Daniel, I want to have my funeral here."
It doesn't. No, Dr. DiBenedetto. No, because it doesn't work that way. As testified by Daniel just a few moments ago, he is a non-for-profit that works gratis for the Sephardic Jewish community of the Jersey Shore. If God forbid a family member of mine died, I would not call Mr. Sultan's organization and say, "Could you handle the funeral for us?" Because it doesn't follow the customs that my community follows. There are specific religious customs that Daniel Sultan's Sephardic Orthodox community follow that his organization puts the funeral, that goes through the traditions for the funeral. It only applies to a certain group of people. Is that accurate, Daniel?
That's accurate. But I will help you.
If you may, what is the Sephardic Jewish community of Jersey Shore? How many municipalities, how many synagogues or congregations does it comprise? How many people are in it? I think that's what has been trying to be asked. How large is the population that the facility wants to serve?
It's a great question. Daniel, do you happen to know?
It's a very good question, and I don't know. I toil with that question a lot of times when we think about
as far as Hamilton or Marlboro.
No. It's Long Branch, Deal, Allenhurst, Ocean Township. You know, that's it.
Lock Arbor, West Long Branch.
Yeah.
That would be good to know.
How can we get that information, Scrimco? How can we get that information?
Is this a corporate entity of any kind, Jennifer? Is it have any kind of it has the name Sephardic Jewish Community of Jersey Shore? Is it some type of formal entity of any kind?
No, there is no formal entity. No formal entity at all. That's like asking how many people does the Greek Orthodox Church serve? If there was a few, there's a certain number that go there to pray, but it serves a Greek Orthodox community that is not quantifiable.
Okay, so no, well, how many? All right, so how many synagogues would be served by this? 5, 6, 4, 3, 25? How many are there in that area? In the area that the 6 towns that you just named?
I don't know.
I guess probably about 5 or 6, right, Daniel?
Clearly, it's not 100.
No, not 100.
That's what I'm saying.
I would suggest that you should bring someone else who has that information.
Wait. I'd like to know what the relevance of that is.
That was the question, I think, that was trying to be asked in a lot of the discussion. That was all.
No, but I'm not sure it matters how much of the community we serve. It wouldn't matter if we served 1 million people.
Well, yes, that's our position, and understandably, that's your position. But you are asking for variances.
Well, we didn't get to
Sometimes
those variances yet.
Well,
We have a planner.
you're not
Well,
asking
but
for
you're
them.
bringing up this witness who is talking about the number of situations where there would be too many people to accommodate the regular parking. That's why it's very relevant. And when he says that in his experience, it's whatever he said, if there is a large increase, then it would be logical to indicate that the number of situations where there could be a concern could be larger. And again,
Sandy,
it's your witness's testimony that you brought in to try to emphasize how the number of occasions where there would be a concern would be. So you've opened up the issue. This is why the members have asked the question.
and understood. And again, couple of things. The first is I appeared before the zoning board on Fiore Funeral Home, and nobody asked how many members of Monmouth County or the state of New Jersey could potentially use that funeral home.
Well, that's not.
I'm not sure why it's relevant for this funeral home as opposed to any funeral home.
Well, let me ask you this then. Why did you bring in a witness where you asked specifically how few number of times there would be concern by this board about the number of large funerals? Why did you do that?
Because the board asked the question at the last meeting, but the number of people that are served, he offered testimony that in the last 20 years, that number of big funerals hasn't changed by more than 10%. The fact that young families are moving here and expanding the school does not have a direct correlation to the number of people who die. And of that number of people who die, how many are prominent and are going to generate big funerals?
Jennifer.
That's your argument. That's your argument, but that's not necessarily what the board
That was
will
the
decide.
testimony he gave. He gave
Well,
you
look,
that sworn testimony.
Well, all right, that's what he testified to. That does not mean what the
Right.
board has to accept it. It does not mean there might not be other witnesses. And again, there's a logical question. Can I finish, Jennifer?
Sure.
There's a logical question about whether or not the relationship between the frequency of large funerals, as Daniel has mentioned, is relevant to the size of the community, whether or not it's 3 months or 12 months. Now, based on the questions, maybe it's been clarified, but certainly without asking many of the questions, there were a lot of unknowns. So, it's up for the board to decide if your conclusion is correct, but that doesn't mean, you raised the issue about relevancy. You asked him the specific question, so I think he protests.
No, I'm not suggesting it's not relevant. That's why I asked the question. What I'm suggesting, I'm not suggesting the frequency is not relevant. What I'm suggesting is the size of the community is not relevant because it's the same community that lives in Brooklyn that lives here, and the numbers haven't changed. He offered that testimony. It doesn't matter how many ways you ask him, that answer is going to remain, isn't going to change.
Jennifer,
By the way, that answer was only extracted after a lot of questions, okay? And who knows what else someone else might testify to.
I'm sorry, Sandy, but Jennifer, do we know that the number that is represented in Brooklyn versus the number here at the Jersey Shore, are we comparing apples and apples? I mean,
It's
I
the
know you're
same-
saying they all moved down here, so it balances out. Is that a true statement? I think that's all we're trying to get to. What's
So
the
to answer, Daniel, I'm gonna phrase it my way now, and hopefully that will address it. Daniel, your organization serves the Orthodox Jewish Sephardic community that lives in the New Jersey, New York metro area. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. And you serve them 12 months a year, whether that a portion is in the Jersey Shore or they're in New York. You serve them 12 months a year because you're the only organization that does it for that community.
That is correct.
Okay. So regardless if they're living in Brooklyn Manhattan or New Jersey, you're the organization year-round that provides this service to that community.
That is correct.
Okay, so the last 20 years, have you noticed any appreciable change in the number of funerals or the number of large funerals, give or take 10%, for that community, regardless of where you're doing the funeral, whether it's in New York or New Jersey?
No, no.
Okay. So if they live in New York or they live in New Jersey, do you anticipate, based on your experience doing this and your family's 4 generations of doing this, any large changes based on where they're going to live?
No.
So Estelle, I think we did that quite some time ago. The community is the same, Daniel, the community is the same community. It's just a matter of how many are living in Brooklyn versus Jersey Shore.
Right.
Jennifer, can I just ask a clarification question?
Sure.
You testified at the beginning that there were approximately 15 funerals a year. Now, is that both in New York and New Jersey, or is that just New Jersey? And if
That's
it's
New
just
Jersey.
New Jersey,
New
what's
Jersey.
the total number? What's the total number for both?
Last year, I think we were 90-ish.
Okay.
90. This year, don't ask me.
Okay. Yeah. It's this year.
COVID hit this community very hard.
Yeah, I can believe it. That's why I said I'd throw the statistics out for this year. I'm talking about in a normal year. Okay.
But I will say, from May to now, the numbers actually went down. Thank God. So it's under control, I think.
That's good.
Yeah.
Okay. Sandy, do we offer, does this witness have to answer questions to the public? Or
Yes.
yes?
Yeah, so we should just reconfirm that there are no other questions by the board, and then we can open up for questions by the public.
Any other questions from the board
For this witness.
for this witness about his testimony? All right, let's open it up to the public. Is there anyone in the public who would like to ask a question of Daniel Sultan of his testimony?
Right, and limited to the testimony, right, Dr. De Benedetto, because
Yeah, limited to
comments.
his testimony. Okay, well then we'll close that. Questions from the public, and Ms. Krimko, would you like to continue?
Dr. De Benedetto, just remind us of the comment made at the beginning about 1 hour, and Mr. Higgins' emphasis that we do have another application, and there's a question about Ms. Krimko wanted to proceed beyond the hour. So this would be the appropriate time to make that decision. If the board will proceed, there is one other application, Jennifer. It's somewhat like this particular one. It's a continuation. We heard testimony before. We have reports in that one, just like we've had in this particular one that you have. Mr. Chairman, you have the request by Ms. Krimko, you have the comment by Mr. Higgins, and presumably we have the next case ready to start, but we haven't recognized the representative of the next application. But Mr. Kirk, do you know if the next application is ready to proceed or not?
I would think. Yeah.
Hello?
Can't hear you, Ron.
Can you hear me?
I see Mr. Wenzel, he's the attorney.
I'm here and we are ready to proceed.
Or you have your witnesses?
Yes, I do.
And okay. Mr. Chairman.
So, Ms. Krimko, I know, go ahead. Did you want to say something?
If I could make a request. recognize, is it possible that we put a pause in this? Allow Mr. Wenzel's matter to proceed, and if he's done before the cutoff of the board, then we could resume?
Is that an airplane taking off?
I think it's Mr. Wenzel.
It is.
Not that he's taking off, but
Could you,
his name is popping up whenever we get those noises.
could you, mute?
I don't have an objection to that. Anyone else of the board have an objection to that?
So go to what
Whatever
time?
that is, it's got to turn that off. It's quite annoying.
Dr. De Benedetto, Estelle is asking what time we would conclude the meeting for tonight. Mr. Wenzel, can you mute, please? That's,
Sure.
yeah, there we go.
Oh, thank God. I guess we wouldn't go anywhere further past 10:30.
Okay. Very good. So then we'll put Ms. Krimko on the side there and see how it goes.
Okay, I'm gonna go off screen and go on mute, and I will wait, and if there's time, and if not, then we can adjourn at that point.
Thank you, Mr. Krimko.
Thank you very much.
All right, so the next application is 3 Sunset Drive LLC, Block 126, Lot 3, 1318 Edgewood Avenue, Wanamass, R6. This application is to subdivide one lot into 2 variances for minimum lot size, minimum lot width, front yard setback, maximum building coverage, minimum off.
Mr. Mayor, Dr. De Benedetto, I don't know if I'm the only one with a problem, but I'm hearing a lot of reverberations. Anybody? I see Mr. Fitzgerald is saying yes. Mr. Wenzel, you seem to be the culprit, unfortunately. Would you go on mute for a second, Mr. Wenzel? All right. Yeah, that stopped. Why don't you say something else, Dr. De Benedetto, to see if that, in fact, is the problem.
So there was
Let's make
going to say
another
the attorney for the applicant is William Wenzel.
All right, now I'm going to turn to Mr. Kirk. Any suggestion how we resolve this?
I think if he turns the audio off on his computer, I think he has to turn the audio off on his computer or turn the audio off on he has 2 things working at the same time, it feels like.
Or
You
he
want to drive over to his house and help him out?
Well, I'm back again. It seems like it's a faint noise. Is that what you guys are hearing?
We're hearing a very disturbing, like, hum. That's
we
really
can barely hear you, Mr.
annoying.
Okay, well, I don't know how to turn the audio off. Let's see what I can do.
You don't happen to have 2 laptops or a cell phone and a computer?
No,
Just my laptop.
No, just my laptop. I know that we can have feedback if I have both going at the same time, but I only have one going.
Mr. Wendell, could you please mute and call from your line?
Yeah, call a landline.
Call into the landline.
What's the number that I should call?
It's on the invite.
We have 1-786-535-3211. Access code 114-689-133. Please turn that off.
The access code is 114.
689 133. But I need you to turn off that little green button to red. There we go.
Hey,
Now, how's that?
much better.
Hold on. I've got to get Mr. Wenzel to say hello.
You there, Mr. Wenzel?
He's on mute.
No, but we wanted him to go mute.
Yeah, you got to give him a minute to call in.
Wait. Are you there? Are you
There he
there?
is.
We can hear you now.
Thank you.
Now I've got echo.
Oh, jeez. Turn the volume off on your computer. Turn the volume off on your computer.
Again, it's like reverb.
Yeah. Which is worse.
Can't make
How's
it
that?
up.
How's that sound?
Better.
Better.
Good.
Okay. All right, the volume's off. I've never had that happen before, and I've used this plenty of times.
Okay, so I think that we have revised plans from the last meeting.
Yes, we do.
And
We have,
I would like our professional to present their revised plans, their comments on the revised plans. Do you have a problem with that, Mr. Wenzel?
no, I don't.
Okay. Mr. Higgins?
Basically, my report is essentially the same as my report on the last hearing. I think the real issues are engineering. They could come up, if they come up with one more parking space, I'd be happy. Because the RSIS requires a total of 5 for the two lots, and they only have 4. I don't know where they could put it.
Okay. Mr. Fitzgerald? You're muted. Unmute yourself, sir.
I am. I'm working on it. For whatever reason, the mouse isn't working. Okay. I did apologize for that. I forgot to turn it on. So I have 2 reports. The first one was issued on November 3rd after the last hearing. Then the last one, or latest one, was issued November 20th. From the beginning, I have not, from an engineering point of view, been able to offer any support for the application to subdivide this property as proposed. I think most of the issues are drainage. I spelled them out early in my spring review. I spelled them out in great detail in my November 3rd review, and I continue to really have no engineering reason to support this. In my professional opinion, there's too much potential impact on adjacent properties because of the relatively extremely flat topography of the site, and the fact that what topography is there drains generally to the east to residential properties to the east, one of which has a sump or low area on it, within which the water will pond. And I see no way to ameliorate the impacts of a development in the same way that we would require it if it was the same types of variances at the zoning board. So from my point of view, I don't recommend you approve the application.
Does any of the board members have any questions for the professionals?
Hey, Bill, this is Ed DeFilia. Just so there's no proposal that has been floated in the interim between meetings that would address these concerns at all, or just none that are being currently presented?
None that I would find sufficient to support subdividing the property.
Okay, thank you.
And just so you know, this subdivision increases the impervious coverage by about 57%, based on my calculations in my report.
Do we go to the public for this? For Bill and Jim? No, right?
No, not at this time.
Is there anybody?
the public can ask questions of them later on, but we usually just go to counsel for the applicant to follow up.
Okay, Mr. Wenzel, do you want to bring in your, I believe it's your engineer?
Yes, I do. He's our engineer and planner. It's Raymond Carpenter. And just some bookkeeping measures. I just want to make sure that the board has the exhibits that we previously supplied, or in addition to the last hearing. We had stormwater calculations of RC Associates dated July 20, 2020. That would be Exhibit A7. Soil boring description of RC Associates dated July 14, 2020. That would be A8. There's soil permeability class rating report of RC Associates dated July 21st, 2020. That would be A9. We have the revised subdivision plan dated 11/11/20. That we'd mark A10. We have a revised grading plan that we would mark A11. That's dated 11/11/20 as well. We have a revised landscape plan dated 11/11/20. That would be A12. And then we have 3 photos, A13, A14, and A15. And there are 3 photos of the property, both before the recent renovation to the existing home and after the renovation to the existing home.
I believe we have all those.
Okay. And I may need control of the system to put up plans, because the public hasn't obviously seen these plans.
Mr. Wenzel, let me just ask a question about the public not having seen it. The exhibits that you're planning to discuss tonight that you mentioned that the public has seen, have they been part of the file that's available to the
Yes,
public within the last 10 days?
Absolutely. Yes, they have been. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
And if I don't need to put them up, then I don't need to take control of the exhibit.
Well, I'd suggest it's up to you. Many times council suggests that their experts, refer to the plans as they testify, but I'd suggest it's up to you.
Okay. Thank you. We'll go without it for now. Mr. Carpenter, are you there?
Yeah, he testified last time, right?
Yes, he did.
Yes.
So his testimony would still be under oath.
Thank you. Mr. Carpenter, since we were last before the board, you took some of the considerations and some of the questions that were raised by the board engineer, and you revised the drainage plans. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And what did you do in your effort to comply with the engineer?
Well, actually, let me clarify one thing. I believe, Mr. Fitzgerald, you said you issued a letter on November 20th reviewing this application?
Ray, I issued, hang on, bear with me. I lost it. Okay, so my most recent letter was dated on November 20th. It was only a 1-page letter. And attached to that was a multi-page letter, I want to say 6 or 7, issued November 3rd.
Okay, I did not get the November 20th letter. I don't know if Mr. Wenzel got it or my applicant, but I have not gotten a copy of that.
I have a November 3rd letter and a September 19th letter. I do not have a November 20th letter.
This is Sandy, bro. Let me just bridge the gap here. So our expert here has the November 3rd letter, right, from Mr. Fitzgerald, right?
Yes, correct.
Yes,
So it's just the November 20th. While Mr. Fitzgerald very, very well paraphrased that, just to make it clear, it's so short. Why don't you just read that, Bill? To the extent that our expert may not have been able to hear you before, if you read it, it's going to take a short period of time.
All right, essentially, there's one paragraph. I'll read it because it's short. From an engineering perspective, I continue to offer no argument in support of this minor subdivision. It is my professional opinion that, given the shape, topography, and current development of the subject property, as well as the topographies of adjacent lots, all proposed grading and drainage solutions have been and continue to be substandard and less than desirable. The recently submitted documents do not, in my opinion, satisfactorily address my prior review comments. Accordingly, I see no engineering and/or planning reason to grant the variances required and requested to develop this property as proposed under this application. Same thing I've been saying.
Okay, there's nothing new there.
I want to address which I think Mr. Carpenter did in a correspondence. The issues are laid out in the November 3rd letter.
Right, and for the board's edification, I think you have a copy of my response to that November 3rd letter. In my letter dated November 11th, 2020, point by point, I go through all the points that Mr. Fitzgerald raised. Succinctly, basically, the way I read the ordinance and every ordinance that Mr. Fitzgerald cited, one, it refers to major projects, which this application is not. Number two, it refers to any improvements would increase the impervious coverage by 1/4 of an acre or not. We do not do that. So per the ordinances, regulations, both the DEP, RSIS, and Ocean Township ordinances, absolutely no drainage requirements are mandated for my applicant. We have taken a 25-year storm, mitigated it to 0 by providing on-site recharge system. We have added additional grading to the plan that Mr. Fitzgerald asked for. We have proved that there will be no additional runoff from the site. In fact, we've reduced it significantly. The other thing is that I'd point out that if you strictly go by your ordinances, the impervious coverage allowed for this lot as it stands right now is 6,750 square feet. When we subdivide the lots, he's allowed to have 6,750 square feet. We're only proposing 3,600 square feet of impervious coverage, less than half of what we're allowed to have on the site. If it were 2 individual lots, there's no requirement per your ordinance. Per the subdivision, I say there's no drainage requirements because the ordinance doesn't support it. Nowhere in the ordinance does it address this site, since it's such a small de minimis site that any drainage is required. In light of that fact, we went ahead and did a drainage study, did a drainage analysis, did drainage calculations to prove that we reduced the runoff from the site. I think that's an extreme benefit to the community and to this site by reducing the runoff. The runoff to the subject lot on lot 202 will basically be insignificant. From our calculations, the drainage to that lot 202 will be almost negligible. So that property owner should be extremely happy that the runoff that he's getting now will no longer be coming in his direction. The new lot 302 now drains through a low spot in the rear of the lot. It's significant in area, and that's where the water ponds. The water does not run across the property lines onto lot 13 or onto lot 202 or onto lot 201. So what we're proposing is a dramatic change in the drainage scheme of the entire site to the point that it's majorly reduced. I think we've gone to extraordinary steps to mitigate the water, and my calculations, my soil analysis, and everything else supports that. The ordinance does not support any drainage calculations or any drainage requirements for this site.
Ray, as the lots are configured right now as one lot, could there conceivably be impervious coverage put on what would be new lot 301 that would be larger than the impervious coverage with the new house on it? That wouldn't need board approval?
They're allowed 3,700 and 50 or 3,700 and, I'm sorry, yeah, 3,750 square feet of impervious coverage on that lot.
So conceivably, the property owner could put a sport court up or a patio or a driveway, and they could take up more of the impervious coverage requirement than the home that's proposed.
Absolutely.
And there wouldn't be any drainage requirement then, because there wouldn't be any need to go before the board, correct?
That's correct. And the ordinance wouldn't support it either.
What do you mean by that?
Because we would not be increasing, no matter what we do, if we maximize the impervious coverage on both lots, the impervious coverage will only be 6,750 square feet, which is less than the 10,000 square feet required in the ordinance for any drainage whatsoever.
And describe again for the board what steps you've planned out to alleviate any drainage problems onto lot 201. 202, I mean.
201? The 201, 202. The water from proposed lot 301 drains in a southeasterly direction for about 2/3 of the lot. This water now goes onto lot 202. When we get done, lot 202 will basically receive negligible amount of runoff between the runoff from the roof that we've mitigated into a recharge system and the fact that we put a line drain along the property of lot 202 and proposed lot 301 to catch any possible runoff for that 5-foot strip of land between the structure and the property line. There is no water going to be flowing onto that site.
So is your opinion that the drainage situation is going to be better with the development than it is now, or the same, or worse?
We're reducing the runoff from lot 301 to a negligible amount. Lot 302 drains the same drainage pattern as it's flowing right now. And the water is ponded in the rear of lot 302, doesn't really transgress across the property lines. I know the contour lines are hard to distinguish and the spot elevations are tough to work with, but that's because of the flatness of the property.
And you're also proposing to reconstruct the curbing and the sidewalks, correct?
That's correct. As per the ordinance, it's required that we do sidewalk and curb. We'll put in brand new curb and sidewalk throughout the whole frontage of the proposed subdivision. And that's a great increase in benefit to the town because, as Mr. Fitzgerald indicated, both the sidewalk and the curb in that area is in terrible shape.
Would the new curbs and sidewalk have anything to do with the drainage?
This ordinance requires that we have the sidewalk and anything from the property line to the curb line must drain towards the curb, and we will do that. So that water will not be draining onto the site. A lot of that water drains onto the site now.
So again, the sidewalks and the curbing will be actually an improvement to the existing drainage as it is on the lots now?
That's correct. And I personally went out there during a rather large storm event to see personally how the drainage flowed, and it does flow in the directions I just represented.
Is that all you have for the board on the drainage issue, Ray?
Yeah, well, yeah, and the thing is, it all relates back to a comment Mr. Higgins wrote in his September 18th letter. He indicates that there's an increase in the impervious coverage, and he states, consequently, the impacts of the drainage from two smaller lots tend to be greater than one larger lot. And that's absolutely not true, because the one larger lot could have exactly the same amount of impervious coverage as the two individual subdivided lots. So there's no change in the drainage pattern based on two lots versus one lot.
And let's just correct, because you mischaracterized my statement. you said that, my report said the impacts on the drainage from two smaller lots had to be greater than from one larger lot. And that is not what my report says. My report says that the drainage from two smaller lots tends to be greater than from one larger lot. There's a big difference.
Mr. Higgins, I'm reading verbatim from your letter. Consequently, the impacts of the drainage from two smaller lots tend to be greater, you're right, than one larger lot.
Yeah.
But that's not the
Not
case
has
here.
to be greater, but tend to be. There's a big difference, sir.
That's correct. I agree.
Get that on the record.
Well, if we can, because I don't disagree with some of what Mr. Carpenter said. I disagree with most of it, but not with some of it. Under the ordinance, property is whatever area it is, and it's allowed whatever percentage of impervious coverage that the zoning allows. And it's the same number in theory, whether it's one lot or two lots. Having said that, the lot that fronts on Sunset Avenue is a 50-foot wide lot, and there are 30-foot setbacks. So, and there's 10-foot side setbacks. So there won't be any sport court wider than 10 feet. Okay. The house is substantially larger than that because they're asking for variances for the setbacks, and they're not addressing what a future owner could do in terms of by right within the rear yards, which I lay out in a certain amount of detail in my November 3rd report. So I disagree with most of the statements about impacts. And I can tell you honestly, we've had a technical review meeting, and I respect Mr. Carpenter. I don't know him well, but I've known his name a long time. We're just not going to agree on this one.
Well, I think, if I'm not mistaken, if the impervious coverage is at grade, does it have to apply to the setbacks, conform to the setbacks?
Correct. You're not allowed to, you can't put a sports court in the front yard.
How about a parking lot? How about parking cars there?
You can do whatever the ordinance allows, Mr. Carpenter.
The ordinance permits a driveway to be a maximum of 20 feet wide.
Correct. And to address Mr. Higgins, right.
Yeah.
And to address Mr. Higgins' comment about the parking, we can stack the parking on lot 301 to pick up an additional parking space.
And that wouldn't involve making the driveway any larger, correct?
No, it would not be any wider, just be longer.
What does the ordinance allow in terms of impervious coverage on a lot?
It allows, impervious coverage is calculated at 90% of the buildable lot area. The buildable lot area is 75% of the lot area. So whether you have two lots or one lot, the allowable impervious coverage for this entire project is still the same, 6,750 square feet.
Well, I hear what you're saying, Mr. Carpenter, but you want to subdivide, you want to make a separate property for 5,000 square foot. What is the buildable lot percentage for that spot, given the setbacks?
It's not based on setbacks. The ordinance says that the buildable lot area is 75% of the lot area. The impervious coverage is limited to 90% of the buildable area. So it's got nothing to do with the setbacks.
Yeah, Joe, but your comment, Joe, I think your question was, what could be built on that lot legally?
Correct.
Obeying the setbacks, and what would that percentage of lot coverage be? Not what is the blanket percentage that the ordinance permits, but what could be put there from a practical standpoint that would be fully conforming.
Yes, that's what I would like to know.
You could theoretically put 3,750 square feet of impervious coverage on both lots. That could be a patio. Doesn't have to be a sports court. Could be just a patio where somebody wants to put out a fire pit and sit around the fire pit. Could be, something of that nature. It doesn't necessarily have to be a sports court. And theoretically, your front setback is 30 feet, your rear setback is 5, so that would leave you 15 feet of area for a fairly significant portion of the lot where you could put in a basketball court if you wanted to do it for a half court or something like that. So there's a lot of things you could do on this property to bring up the impervious coverage to the maximum allowed. And there'd be no recourse from the towns at all, because we wouldn't have to get a variance.
Mr. Higgins, do you agree with that statement?
I would have to see a layout myself to agree or disagree. And the other question is, I am not so sure that the town would have no recourse, because if there's a building permit submitted, the township engineer would review the grading and see whether or not it would work and whether there would be any detriment.
But the ordinance clearly states that if the impervious coverage doesn't exceed 10% of the lot, or 10%, or I'm sorry, doesn't exceed 1/4 of 1 acre, then the no drainage, quote unquote, no drainage is required.
Yeah, except that you're talking about design standards, but you're looking for variances from the zoning ordinance, and there's no reason to grant them if the impacts on neighboring properties can be substantive. So,
But we already mitigated by our calculations, we show we mitigated the influence on adjacent properties by reducing the runoff to negligible.
I disagree with your stat. I explained why. I don't accept that as a mitigation. But that's my opinion. And you have your, that's what I was trying to tell the chairman. You and I aren't going to agree on this one, right?
What are the variances that they're seeking?
Hold on 1 second.
We're seeking new
Minimum
real
lot area
one.
for the corner lot. Minimum lot width for the corner lot. Front yard setback for the corner lot on both streets. And let's see, front yard setback, which is existing on the interior lot. And then lot coverage, building coverage on the interior lot. And minimum gross floor area, which is sort of an oxymoron there, which is an existing, well, it's an existing condition, yeah, on the interior lot.
I think they also need a side yard setback on the corner lot. Could be wrong on that.
No, they don't. They're
Okay.
required, they're permitted 5 feet, and they're at 5 feet.
We're at 5.5 feet.
Does anyone else from the board have any questions? Mr. Wenzel, do you have anyone else that you wanted to?
No, I don't, Mr. Chairman. I'd just like the board to review the photographs that we supplied of both the lot prior to the existing home's renovation and the home as it exists now that's been renovated. And again, those are the last 3 exhibits that we supplied.
Do you want to take over the screen and show those?
They're part of the package, but yeah, I can take over the screen and show those.
Bill, I'd like to say something at some point.
Yeah, this is Dennis Roberts, Mr. Chairman. He's the owner of the property. I can actually have Dennis explain what's in this photograph that I just put up. Dennis has testified previously also at this hearing.
Thank you. Yes, that's a picture of what the current garage looks like that sits on the property that we are trying to become a new lot. The house next to it to the right has been now renovated and is much different. Hopefully that you've seen that. It was in deplorable condition, this entire site. We've gotten tremendous feedback from the neighborhood regarding what we've done.
Dennis, I just put up another, what is that?
That's another
photograph?
shot, right, of the, also of the garage. The garage, I think, is a big portion of this permission that we're granting for this new lot. We feel that the garage, yeah, that's the new renovated home. We feel that the garage is not proper for the area. It is in very bad shape. It doesn't go with the community there. It sits in an awkward place. It just does not go. The home that we're proposing would be very similar to this home that you're looking at now, and some more similar to what's in the neighborhood, a Cape style house that would fit very nicely in that community there. And the garage would be removed. It would no longer exist.
And there would be a driveway in front of this house that we're looking at in this photograph now, correct?
Correct. The other thing is also with the, I believe with the driveways that we're doing, we would improve the off-street parking. You know, it does create more spaces for off-street parking as well. Do you have the elevation shot, Bill, of what the new home proposed elevation from the architect would look like?
In the last meeting, yes, I did.
I just want to state while he's looking for that, for example, the house next to us, I think it's on lot 02, and there's two new homes across the street. They're built in the last five years across the street. I think next to us in the last 10 years or so. None of those homes have this type of drainage that we're talking about. They're all 50-foot lots. 50-foot lot is the prominent lot there for corner lots and all interior lots. And no one has done that I've seen or found anything like what we're proposing with this drainage. And I've done this type of drainage on new homes and renovated homes many times in the past. And what it literally does is, as Mr. Carpenter testified, it stops. All of the gutters and leaders will go into this recharge system. There will literally be virtually no water going anywhere but into the recharge system. So I truly feel, as an expert in construction and doing this for many years, that it does work, and it eliminates any water draining into any of the adjacent properties, and even on its own property as well. I'm sorry, I didn't see, Bill, if you had that or not.
And I can't, I'm trying to pull it up, Dennis. I can't pull it up quick.
I just wanted to show them roughly what that elevation might look like. It shows, you know, it's a well-treated, yeah, that one there, the colored one. It's a well-treated lot, and we're going to keep it that way. You know, I am a proponent of trees. We're not going to go in there and cut down a bunch of trees or anything. We're going to cut down, there's one that's a couple that are dangerously leaning there that we've been asked also to cut down from neighbors, and we will do that. But all these perimeter trees are going to remain intact. The landscaping will remain intact, and it'll be a home that will fit the neighborhood for sure. I thought I saw it there, Bill, but now I don't see it. It doesn't matter too much, but just want to give them a sense, if they haven't seen it, of what the you know, the elevations might look like from both Sunset and Edgewood. It's a hand-drawn, colored picture.
Yeah, I know what you're looking for.
I'm pretty sure we had it.
Yeah, we did.
Do we have any questions from the board for?
There it is. If I can just describe that real quick. The top portion of that would be looking from Edgewood Avenue. The home on the right is the one that we have already renovated. And the home on the left would be a depiction of what that home would look like the new home on the new lot from Edgewood Avenue. And then the lower picture is what the house would look like from Sunset. The driveway would be on Edgewood. There'd be no ingress or egress from Sunset. And it would truly fit the community much better aesthetically in every way. The garage would be gone, and it would not be a monstrous home or anything like that. It would fit exactly what's in the neighborhood already.
I have a question, if I can, if you'd help me out here. The picture on the left of the house is facing the side street, correct? So on the street where the picture or the house on the right is facing me, and so what we're looking at is a house looking sideways facing one way and a house facing in another direction. Am I looking at this wrong?
No, you're not correct. What you're looking at, if you look at the top two houses, is if you were standing on Edgewood and we built a new home on the new lot that we're proposing, that is roughly what it would look like. The home on your right is the home that exists now on the lot. It faces Edgewood. The new home would face Sunset, and you would see the side of that home.
Right, that's what I'm saying. I guess I'm not saying it clearly. So on the street, you're going to have a house facing Sunset, and then the renovated house is facing Edgewood.
Exactly, that's correct. Right.
Anybody else? I would say, I guess we close this portion of the testimony and offer it out to the public. Does anyone from the public have any questions?
Doctor, this is Vaughn Clay. I live next door to the property in question.
Okay, so you have to state your name, right, and your property address, I believe. Is that correct, Sandy?
Yes. Did he testify last time?
Yeah, he did.
I did.
Yes.
Okay.
And so did we swear you in last time?
You did.
Okay. So as you might remember, at this point in time, you would just ask questions of the witness. At the end of the hearing, after all witnesses are presented, if there are any other witnesses by counsel, then you have the opportunity under oath to make any comments in general.
Okay. The last meeting back in September, I believe, when it was held, I think there was a question, I think Mr. Carpenter brought up some information about some comparables that they had done looking at other corner lot properties, and I had asked whether or not he had taken into account when those properties were built, and so I'm wondering if he'd had opportunity to do that since.
No, I didn't go and look at all the building permit applications for those lots. A lot of them predate the ordinance. So I would say, to my knowledge, I don't think any of them were created in the last 10 or built in the last 10 years.
Okay. I guess the other concern, the question I would have is how many these older growth oak trees are you talking about removing?
I believe if you look at the landscape plan, one second, let me pull it out. I believe there's 1, 2, basically 3 trees. There's one tree that's like a double trunk. That's out right next to the garage. And then there's one tree probably midway on the lot, front to back, going from Sunset back on Edgewood, maybe 20 feet off the property line between your property and the proposed lot 301. But all
I
the
think
rest of the trees remain.
that might be the one that's leaning at like 45 degrees over there.
Yes.
I'm wondering if Mr. Fitzgerald could maybe just kind of go back and explain maybe why he doesn't feel that Mr. Carpenter's analysis of the drainage solutions would work.
You have to unmute yourself, Bill.
There we go. All right, so it's laid out pretty detailed in my November 3rd correspondence, but let me see if I can summarize quickly. What is being proposed is a subdivision, nothing else. There's testimony about the house, and there are some variances associated with the size of the house that's being proposed, but the end result is there's a subdivision that's going to create 2 lots where there's now 1.
Okay.
Once that's developed, future occupants of either house have rights to do certain things that could increase impervious cover. And I disagree with Mr. Carpenter regarding the path of the water in the backyard. And if I need to, I can explain that in a lot of detail. But having said that, the water runs across the easterly property line about 2/3 of the way down the right-hand lot where the renovated house is, and across lots 202 and 201. 201 has a sump on it. So there's a fair amount of impervious coverage that can be put back there by right by way of patio in those rear yards that's really likely, that's not being shown on this plan. And so when Mr. Carpenter says, well, what's being proposed, he's 100% correct. That's what they're proposing. But there's no control over what the next occupant of either house in perpetuity has other than the ordinance. And that water will run across the 2 adjacent, well, one's adjacent and one is behind, adjacent only at the back rear corner of the existing residence. Having said that, the storm, there's a 2x2 inlet on the common boundary with lot 2.02, which was not addressed. At least I did not find that it was addressed in the analysis. And the roof runoff from the new home goes into a recharge pit. And that's fine that they're offering it. I don't have any substantive issue with it. The lake happens to be tidal. So except in rare cases, and I can't remember any, that is why the gentleman that testified a little bit earlier doesn't find a whole lot of these types of systems. Stormwater mitigation in tidal waters has not been a priority. It's minimizing impacts on adjacent properties that we care about. So that's been my whole objection to the thing. Having said that, the analysis that was used is not something that's generally accepted. The rational method is used to size storm drains for peak flows. The rational triangle that goes back to around 1977 with a gentleman from North Jersey named Al Pagan is really not accepted in the profession as a means to calculate stormwater volume. Having said that, the dry well may well work, but there's still going to be, in my opinion, impacts on the adjacent properties or potential for them, which is why I say I'm 99% sure that history shows that a large lot does not get the same amount of impervious coverage, even though it's allowed, as 2 smaller lots. You can look at this lot, which has been in existence for some time, doesn't have a whole lot of extra impervious coverage on it other than a garage and a small house. Also, there are restrictions where you can put things like sports courts and patios, and they're not in the front yard, so they're not as big as what would be permitted if this stays as 1 lot is not as great an area as if this goes into 2 lots. This gets subdivided. That's my position on it.
Okay, and maybe one more question for you, Mr. Fitzgerald, and thank you for that. That helps clarify. based on your professional experience, are the easements that are being requested in terms of the size of the property in relation to the size of the lot
Variance.
that exists here? The variant. I'm sorry. Is that a common request that you see? And if so, is it approved? Or I don't know if that's a question that you can ask, but is the amount of space that's being asked for a variance a common request that you see?
I honestly can't answer that with any accuracy. I really deal pretty much with the engineering, although certainly I see a lot of variances at the zoning board. But again, I only deal with the engineering, so I don't have any real statistics. So I don't want to hazard a guess. I mean,
sure.
The board's going to make a decision based on our discussion in part, and I don't want to be inaccurate to anyone's detriment.
All right, fair.
This is St. Brown. Really, each application rests on its own state, own set of facts. So it really wouldn't be proper to talk about how many variances are granted.
Okay, fair enough. That's all I have.
Back to you, Dr. DiBenedetto.
So we can, if no one else has any questions from the audience, we can close the public hearing.
No, we go back to Mr. Wenzel to see if he has any other witnesses.
Mr. Wenzel, do you have any other witnesses?
No, I do not.
Bill, I'd like to speak on a few points that were raised during the public portion.
Sure.
One, Mr. Fitzgerald stated that the rational method of hydrographic calculations for stormwater runoff is the ones that I use are not permitted. But reading directly from the Oceantown Ordinance 21-55-14E, it says, design engineer shall calculate runoff using one of the following methods: the rational method for peak flow and modified rational method for hydrographic computations. That's exactly what I used. And as far as the water table is concerned, the permeability, the shore boring that we submitted shows that the seasonal high water table is 94 inches below existing grade. Nowhere near the recharge system that we're proposing will not be impacted by our high water table. So I see that the drainage calculations are valid. They show that there's a dramatic reduction in runoff from the site. And I think Lot 202 will be amazed at how much lack of water is flowing onto that property in the future.
Mr. Wenzel, any other comments from your professionals?
Given, right.
All right. I'd like to.
Dr. DiBenedetto, in light of the fact that Mr. Carpenter has been testifying as both an engineer but also as a planner, as I recall him being qualified to testify to, especially at the last hearing, I suggest we go back to Mr. Higgins to see if he has any response to the planning related arguments by the applicant's expert.
No, I don't, but I do have an answer to a question I believe asked by the chairman earlier in the hearing. And the question was, what could legally be built on the corner lot, the 5,000 square foot corner lot, without variances in terms of impervious coverage? And what can be built on that is actually, you would have an envelope for your accessory structures, whether they be at grade or above grade, that would be 15 feet wide by 65 feet long. That's a total of 975 square feet. Then if you assume that part of that 15 by 65 is a house, and you put a driveway in, the driveway would occupy 600 square feet. So the percentage of lot coverage of buildable lot area would be 42% that could be built there legally. So you couldn't get anywhere near the 90% the ordinance would permit if everything else could be done legally. And the other point is that the proposed house on the lot, the building coverage is 34.5%. The driveway is another 10%. So what's being proposed on that lot with just the driveway and the house and no other accessory impervious coverages would be about 44.5%, would be greater than that 42%.
Okay.
But I think just getting on Sandy's thing, Bill, what do you have to say about Mr. Carpenter's statement about the methodology?
They'll disagree.
What?
In the ordinance.
You used the rational triangle that the falling limb was equal to the time of concentration. It's been around forever. That is not the modified rational method.
It said the rational method or the I don't have it right in front of me. Again, Bill, the rational method or the modified rational method shall be used.
That's correct.
That's right from your ordinance.
Rational method is not accepted manner of calculating stormwater runoff volume. If you get the peak flow from that and design storm drain conduits with it. You don't take the falling limb equal to the time of concentration, have an isosceles triangle, get the volume of runoff under it and use that. That's not accepted in the industry. That was back in the 70s. As I said, when Al Pagan, I used to write about it quite a bit, and no one had any other hydrograph at the time.
Okay.
But that's not what the ordinance says.
So, Jim, going back to your report, your testimony, and listening to Mr. Carpenter from a planning point of view, of course, he's advocated for the variances, and obviously Bill Fitzgerald still does not agree. In referring to your testimony, your report, if the board, had some concerns about Mr. Carpenter's conclusions of the planner, what concerns would you have as a planner in granting it in light of Bill Fitzgerald's testimony and the fact that for proposed lot 301, there are 4 variances being needed to grant the application for lot 302. There are also 4 variances needed.
No, 3 variances for 302.
Well, they each require a parking variance, so.
Yeah, so in Jim's report, he indicates 4 variances each. Is that still your conclusion, Jim?
Yes, it is. Unless they were to put another parking space on one of the 2 lots, then it would eliminate 1 variance.
Which we can do.
Right. And that would increase the impervious coverage, which again goes back to the drainage. My biggest concern is the negative impact of the drainage. And I think that's what the board has to look at on this one.
There's no negative impact.
So you're talking about NJSA 40:55D-70C2, and not necessarily the positive criteria, but the negative criteria?
The negative criteria, that's correct.
Right.
And I think it's a matter of the applicant's engineer thinks one thing, Bill thinks the other, and the board has to weigh the 2 and make a decision whether they think there is a substantial negative impact.
So if we referred back to your November 20th report in the analysis section on page 3, would you still have the same conclusions in your report about concerns about negative impact based on what you've heard tonight?
Based on what I've heard, I know that Bill has concerns in terms of impervious coverage, in terms of drainage, and I obviously, having worked with him for 20 years, I would have to go with his opinion. I'm not an engineer, but based on what I've heard tonight, I'd have to, and knowing his competence, I'd have to side with him.
But with regards to those issues, it would be up to the board to decide to make its own factual conclusions based on the opposing positions on drainage. Is that fair to say?
That's correct. That's what I'm saying.
And that's the bottom line.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't want to substitute my opinion for the board's.
Exactly. Yeah, especially not with regards to engineering.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to clarify the issues for the benefit of the board there, Dr. DiBenedetto. I hear that Mr. Wenzel has no more witnesses. So now we would open it up to the public for comment. Certainly the next door neighbor might have comments in addition to those questions he had. And I don't know if there are any other members of the public who would want to make comment.
All right, so let's close the, no, we were going to open it up to comments to the public
Yes.
right now. Does anybody from the public have any comments about this application?
Doctor, this is Vaughn Clay again. I appreciate the opportunity just to be heard. And I appreciate all the information that's been presented over the last two meetings that I've participated in. I think for us, my wife and I, who are on the eastern border of the property in question, I think drainage is obviously a big concern. I think the number of trees that are said to be removed, that may eventually will be removed. I think it's the future concern that I think has been noted about the impervious covering of the property from a future owner and the density that the neighborhood is already pretty well dense as it is. So I think that one of the main reasons that we purchased the house that we're in years ago was the fact that the lot was open and we were to understand that it would remain open. Not that we had any control over that, but I think it's a concern that, now we'd have another house right on top of us, only 5 feet away from our property line. So, I think those are our main concerns, and I appreciate the opportunity to be heard.
Mr. Vaughn, just to clarify for the record, you were sworn in last meeting?
Correct, I was.
Right, and so therefore your testimony tonight is understood to still be under oath, right?
Correct.
Thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Anyone else from the public? I move to close the public hearing on the subdivision of 3 Sunset Drive. Can I get a second?
I'll second.
Call the roll.
We have to make a motion, right?
Right, no, we're closing the public hearing, correct? Andy?
Yeah, that's a motion, yes.
Who made the second?
Who made the second?
Jeff Weinstein.
Thank you.
Roll call.
Mr. DeFiglia?
Yes.
Mr. Duffy?
Yes.
Mr. Fisher?
I think Dave said yes. He's muted.
Dave. You're muted.
Dave.
Unmute.
I can see him.
Sorry about that. Yes.
Thank you. Ms. Close?
Yes.
Mr. Sayano?
Yes.
Mr. Weinstein?
Yes.
Chairman DiBenedetto?
Yes.
Dr. DiBenedetto, well, many times council don't necessarily have summations. I think we should offer that to Mr. Wenzel to see if he wants to sum up, even though we have no more witnesses to testify.
No, I defer to the board.
Okay.
Thank you.
Can I ask anyone to make a positive or negative resolution for this project, this application?
I'm sure I'll make a motion to deny the application.
Is there a second?
I'll second. This is Ed.
Jeff, could we have your factual reasons for offering a negative resolution?
Sure. I'm basically going by Bill's steadfast belief that the sewage drainage, that this is not conducive to proper sewage drainage. So, you know, I need to respect Bill's opinion, and he was steadfast in his belief. He never backed down. So
would you base your motion based on all testimony by Mr. Fitzgerald tonight?
what did you say? I'm sorry.
Are you basing your motion on Mr. Fitzgerald's testimony?
Yes.
Completely tonight? Okay.
Yes, I am.
And I have to clarify your motion. It's not, did you say sewer drainage? You mean just drainage?
Just drainage, sorry. Just drainage. Right. Sorry. Just drainage.
Thank you.
No problem.
So we have so Jennifer, would you like to call roll call for this? We have a motion and a second.
Is there any other debate about it, Dr. De Benedetto?
Anyone else have a debate or about the motion?
I'd like to ask maybe a question or a comment. So I agree with the fact that this garage sitting on Sunset is a bit of an eyesore there. I guess the big problem is that there's just not enough space, but I do believe in some capacity this would improve, definitely improve the house look over there. I mean, I just wanted to hear what everyone else had to say about that.
Hey, Dr. Fisher, this is Ed. I absolutely agree with you. After our first hearing and hearing the testimony from Mr. Higgins and from the professionals representing the owner and the applicant, I looked in that neighborhood as well, and I agreed with their assessment that the new house would fit well into the neighborhood, that it would be an improvement. But much like Mr. Weinstein, I am unable to get over the drainage issues that Mr. Fitzgerald has raised.
And another concern I had was, parking is always a little dicey over there. And I know we're adding a driveway, but there's only so many cars that driveway is going to hold. I understand that area it's a very tough spot to park. I mean, it's another concern that I had over there also. It's kind of an interesting debate whether it's going to bring up the property value, bring down the property value, but I got to think putting a new house on there, and it seems like it's a hot area anyway. Wasn't when I was growing up, but now it's a very desirable spot to be. Could improve the area.
I have
wanted to hear what anyone had.
Dr. Fisher, are you suggesting that would be a reason to support Mr. Weinstein's motion?
I was just looking to hear what the council had to, say. I wanted to hear a little debate at that point.
Yeah.
And Sandy, I have a question or a comment. Based on what Bill is basically saying, is there any way that we could accommodate what Bill's saying and still build a home there, or if that it's just not feasible?
Well, you'd have to recall what Bill Fitzgerald's testimony was, but you might.
Well, I
believe his testimony was that based on what's been submitted to him, he doesn't think that can be done.
Well, just to get back to Dave's thing, Dave is actually asking a different question, which is, Bill, do you think anything could be built on there that would improve it? Right? Is that what you're kind of asking, Dave?
That question, I'll give you two answers. I mean, I don't understand why the current owner doesn't maintain a garage, or the curbs, or the sidewalks. Curbs and sidewalks are required to be maintained by a property owner in the ordinance. It's got nothing to do with the benefit of his zoning application. The garage, if that's what he chooses to have, I mean, there's no reason that can't be improved like the house was. Having said that, I don't know, we have a set of written standards that they're not part of the ordinance. If you're before the zoning board of adjustment and you need variances and they're somehow related to drainage, that's what we require. I can tell you that what is required there cannot be achieved on this lot because of its topography. having said that, you are certainly free to disagree with me. Applicant had an expert, and he and I, as we said several times tonight, we're not going to agree on this. It's just that way.
And that person, the neighbor who spoke up, what happens if we do agree with him and there is drainage problems? What happens then?
Don't call me. That's
something that can be done.
Question and answer. He should not have. There already is a little bit of an issue with water running from the development on this property that way. It is an existing condition. My position is there's no reason to grant variances to potentially make it worse. I mean, but there are other, as people have pointed out, Mr. Fisher and Mr. DeFilia, there are other considerations. It's not an easy one. I'm giving you my opinion as an engineer, but you guys are making a decision for the township, so you have to look at what I'm saying, what the neighbors are concerned about, what may happen, and what's best for the township.
I'll just interject by saying one thing. You've heard our engineer reiterate what he said before under testimony, which can be considered, but also as you determine whether or not you want to vote for Mr. Weinstein's resolution or not, also be reminded about all the testimony by Mr. Carpenter too. Okay. Again, you are analyzing which expert to agree with, or make your own independent judgment and not agree with either of them. You could do that too. And again, this deals with the negative criteria, as Mr. Higgins pointed out. All right, so Dr. DiBenedetto, I don't know if we have any other comments.
Well, I mean, my only comments were that I asked, what was the actual size of house could be built there without variances, Bill was kind to do the calculation, was about 44%. Let's say it's even 50%. So then you'd use 25,000 square foot, right? Is that what we were talking about? It's certainly smaller than 3750 is what they're saying. So, again, the drainage is a big issue in that area. I know from other residents, it's tidal because of Deal Lake there, and I know that there are a lot of people pumping water, so that's a big issue. That's my 2 cents on the matter.
It would be a crawl space, not a basement.
Could be a slab. So, well, one of the problems that I saw with the proposed solution is that against the easterly property line, where he's allowed a 5-foot setback and the proposed building was on that, there's essentially no slope from north to south. So he can't get water from south to north. He can't get water in that side yard to flow towards Sunset Avenue. What it does is it flows onto this property, or a portion of it, from the house to the east. And the solution was to put a stone trench against the masonry foundation of this house for water to collect, because they can't meet, as I pointed out, the intent of the building code requires grading away from the first 10 feet away from a foundation. That was another. There's so many things that I see that are substandard in the application.
Sandy, we have a motion and a second.
Yes, correct.
Shouldn't we be moving forward in that, in a positive or negative manner?
Oh, you can address that question to Dr. DiBenedetto.
I'm asking that because we've had a motion and a second. We had time for comments. We've had time for questions. The board has made a motion and a second.
Right. Jen, is there any more questions from the board? Any more comments? No? Jen, roll the call for the
Okay.
motion.
Mr. DeFiglia?
Yes.
Mr. Duthie?
Yes.
Mr. Fisher?
Yes.
I'm sorry?
Yes.
That was a yes.
Thank you. Ms. Close?
To be clear, we're voting on a motion to deny, correct?
Correct.
That's correct,
And
Ms.
yes,
Your vote, Estelle?
yes,
Thank you. Mr. Sayana?
Yes.
Mr. Weinstein?
Yes.
Chairman DiBenedetto?
Yes.
Thank you.
So we thank council and the applicant for appearing before us. The resolution of denial of the application will be prepared for memorialization for vote, presumably at the next regularly scheduled meeting, which will be in December. Thank you for appearing, Mr. Wenzel. And
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you, Mr. Wenzel.
So it is, it's 10:26, and I see Ms. Krimko is back.
Hey, Mrs.
she's back.
Hey, Jen, how are you?
Oh, I'm doing great. How are you? How's your night been?
Oh, it's been a great night. So, we're just approaching 10:30 here. Why don't we adjourn and move on to next meeting?
Okay, so
Or
you won't,
I will, Ron, we could make Jennifer first at the next meeting. Is that possible?
I guess the question would be, and I know I'm out of order here. Ms. Krimko, your professional planner is here. Would you say that the testimony would be more than 20 minutes of hers?
well, probably not, but my question also is when is the next meeting? But
But she would also need the foundation from the other experts to testify, I would think.
Look, from my
Yeah,
position as director, I'm trying to get plans acted upon. It's difficult enough during a pandemic.
Well, the meeting, I believe the next meeting is December 14th. That's what's scheduled. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah, so if you say, and who else do you have, Jen, after your planner?
well, I have the engineer to go over the plan changes, and I have the architect, if you want to hear more from him. I know it was 8 months ago, but he did testify as to the layout, and it hasn't changed all that much.
So 3 more professionals?
Definitely 2, but the engineer is going to be limited. It's really going to be the planner.
How about the traffic engineer?
And as we discussed earlier tonight, there has been a bit of a gap in terms of the months. It seems that to have those witnesses maybe even refresh our recollection would be a good idea.
Well, and understood, and I guess my question then is, and I know that you guys love this word, but what about a special? Because I can't get all that done in an hour. And we were ready to come. We waited for the October meeting because we were told that's going to be the first live meeting, and then it was canceled at the last minute before we had time to notice first. Understanding why, I'm not challenging that it shouldn't have been canceled. So my question becomes, this has been going on for 8 months in an effort to keep everybody's memory from waning. Can we all get
Jennifer,
together for an evening and wrap it up?
Jennifer, I have how about an answer to that would be, we will not schedule anything else for the December 14th meeting but this application. It seems that there are a lot of questions and a lot of testimony.
And that's fine, except I have that minor subdivision with no variances that I hope to finish all of the drainage issues with Bill, so I can't not let that one go forward. That one's been waiting also, so I would ask for just those two.
So what
Is
I would,
that a minor site plan subcommittee?
No, that's
No.
minor subdivision.
That has variances?
so this would be a Jennifer Krimko, December 14th meeting?
Right.
Yes.
So there would be no notice required on this application for the next proceeding?
Correct.
And notify the public already for the other one, Jen?
In fairness to Jennifer, I want to get, because we didn't get where I thought we were going to get to tonight, and I just want it out there so there's no reason not to have it addressed. But way back when you thought you needed a parking variance and you were talking about potentially using available right-of-way places, I asked a question that we never got the answer to because of the disruption. Was the crossing safe? Because I had a lot of concerns about it, and that was never answered. So if there seems to be a lot of discussion tonight about the availability of parking stalls on the site versus, you know, how many people could come and do you need them? Is it safe to cross that street there?
Okay, and we did put a lot, we'll readdress it as it relates to the signage that we're proposing.
No, it's the site distance. Got nothing to do with the sign.
Oh, okay, fine. Well, then that's different.
That was the question. I'm sorry. The signage and the striping, you go by the MUTCD, you stick to that, you can't go wrong. It's the site distance, because as I understand Logan Road, I'm allowed to come off the highway, and I'm decelerating, but it's whatever speed limit, and where that crossing is, and where there's a bend in the road to the south that needs to be addressed.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for pointing that out. We will address it, and my fingers are crossed since I don't have my witnesses on the screen that they're available for December 14th. I haven't gotten any notices, any texts otherwise, so I guess I will see you December 14th without the need for further notice.
Very good.
Yes, that sounds good.
All right, thanks, everybody, and happy Thanksgiving and stay safe.
Same to you.
Take care, Jed.
Bye-bye.
Before we close the meeting, I just want to, somebody mentioned to me earlier, to remind everybody, I just wanted to thank Steve Levy for his service to the board. I know he recently passed away, and I just wanted to thank him publicly.
Terrible loss. And he was a great member.
Yes, I'm sure a lot of guys, a lot of people here know him very well, and it's sad to see anyone go so young. Okay, I'd like to close the meeting.
John Duffy, motion to adjourn.
This is Ed, I'll second.
Jen?
I'm sorry, who seconded it?
Ed.
Thank you. Okay, I'm gonna, oh. Did you figure out?
Yes.
I'm so sorry. Mr. Duffy?
Yes.
Mr. Fisher?
Yes.
Ms. Close?
Yes.
Mr. Sayano? Mr. Sayano?
He ran.
Yes.
Okay.
Sorry.
Mr. Weinstein?
Yes.
Chairman D. Benedetto?
Yes.
Thank you. I think that's the best I said so far.
Good holiday, everybody.
Great job, Jen.
Good job. Thank you, everybody.
Have a good night.
Happy Thanksgiving.